Ladies and gentlemen, we're back with another edition of PodFest Asia. And I'm so happy because we have in the house, Rob Greenlee, a legend, and someone that, everybody in Asia should actually meet in person one day, I think.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
How are you today, my friend?
Doing great, Wayne. Thanks so much for inviting me to join you. Yeah.
Fantastic. We have so many questions prepared for you today, and such a pity we only have 30 minutes to do that. So I think it's great to maybe start by introducing you to our audience, because I think it's great that you have someone of your stature and you're well-known evangelist of the podcasting industry, and also the current board member and former chairperson of the Podcast Academy and 2017 inductee in the Academy of Podcasters Hall of Fame and VP of Content and Partnership at Libsyn. So thank you once again. And of course, we want to start by asking you how the Podcast Academy was actually formed, why it was formed, and the well-known organizations that the Academy is modeled on.
Yeah, it was actually formed by a founding group about a year or so ago by Hernan Lopez, who's the CEO of Wondery, and a few others. I kind of came in late in the formation process and joined the board last March of 2020 , and they had a vision for what they wanted to create. They wanted to recognize quality podcasts and drive attention to the podcasting medium, which seems to be definitely heating up and expanding quite rapidly around the globe and in the US as well. So they thought it would be a good idea to come up with almost like an Academy Awards type of an event, though it's all going to be virtual. But we are going to have a on-stage presence in Los Angeles where it's going to be based, and it's just going to be streamed live. And like what's being done in a lot of events now, they're a hybrid between being in a particular place and being online, but it's not like we're going to audience or a lot of people there. It's all going to be done over the internet, the power of Zoom or these video conferencing platforms that are so dominant now. But the Academy is really just about highlighting and featuring and bringing the industry together around very, very high quality content that can raise the awareness of podcasting and the quality content that exists in the medium.
That's fantastic. And I think in a nutshell, you have summed it up for us why it was formed, how it was formed, and also the well-known organizations that's modeled on. And of course, we also want to hear from you, why this Podcast Academy will serve the international community as well, not just the United States audience.
Right. Yeah, that is part of our mission statement, is to become a more of a global organization. Obviously, we're just a few months into the formation of the organization, and our focus has been just getting our membership base built, building just a base of programs, around mentorship and also webinar programs for the membership to help train people to be high quality podcast producers and to share that knowledge. But as we grow that, many of our members are from all over the world, and I can see this organization, and that is the mission of the organization, is to be a academy that reaches all around the globe, because podcasting is a global medium. So you really can't not do that. So that was a early decision that the board of directors made around the long-term mission. But we kind of had to get our feet on the ground first, built the organization, and build our first awards event, and then our vision for expanding globally and doing more activities outside of the US is definitely in the, as they say, roadmap.
This is brilliant. And how would you actually write your elevator pitch for Asia-based podcasters, a person like me, right? For a membership into the Podcast Academy?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that it's really a matter of bringing the industry together as much as we can. I think for the 16 years that I've been involved in the podcasting medium itself, we've tended to have different groups, different factions of the industry around comedians, around technology podcasters. The indie side of podcasting has always been very, very large. And then you've seen the the commercial radio groups, and then you see the public radio groups. And so you can kind of see, in the sports podcasters, and there's different factions of the medium. And now we have a lot of podcasts coming out of the entertainment companies now, coming primarily right now out of Hollywood, but I think that there's other, like Bollywood and some of those content creation ecosystems are going to be more and more participating in the podcasting space, and just bringing the industry together and creating a kind of a not necessarily a centralization, but just a pathway for people to recognize things that are going on outside of just one particular country. And that's kind of the bigger picture. And that's also a big trend that's happened in podcasting just in the last couple of years, is more of a global understanding of the expansion and development of podcasting in other countries. And I thank a lot of the organizations like the Edison Research Company, James Cridlin from Pod News, who's based out of Australia, and he covers the globe when it comes to podcasting news and updates. So it's much easier now to have a global view of what's happening in the medium right now that's really never existed before.
Yeah, this global community has really come together and actually make a collaboration also happen on a daily basis. I see it from my own point of view, from where I'm based in Singapore as well, right? I see so many collaboration opportunities that is coming fast and furious. In fact, every time when I live stream or maybe do a podcast live, I get a lot of DMs from podcasters who are reaching out also on how to actually be a guest at your show or at another show. So it's like really great to see all this movement and all these activities that are really sparking so much great enthusiasm for this industry. And the next question will be about why, with so many large companies, radio and otherwise, jumping into podcasting, is there still room for independent podcasters, someone like me, for example?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if you look at the 16 plus years of the medium, the larger media companies and commercial radio have really always been involved in podcasting. If I think about the very first group of podcasts that was formed back in 2004, when it really kind of rolled out, there was a lot of larger media companies getting involved in this medium, and they've come and gone, and they've come back again. And so there's been this fluid of larger media companies and the indie side. And specifically when you see in the US, the indie market is what's really built podcasting, because that's where the vast majority of content is being produced from is the indie market. That's just a person that has a business, or they have a passion around a hobby, or they want to create a show that can help to build their personal brand. As we're seeing now happen more and more, people are creating branded podcasts to support their businesses and building community with this medium. So you're really seeing opportunities really abound, and there is a lot of new podcasts that have been formed over the last 6 months or so. I think we're picking up close to 90,000 new shows every month on a global scale. And while that may seem like that's a lot of podcasts, there is a certain amount of churn that happens in the medium. People start podcasts and then they realize that they're actually a lot of work to do if you want to be successful at them. And sometimes people don't have time to do it, or they run out of things to talk about. They come up with an idea for a show and it kind of fizzles on them, or life gets in the way. So there's a natural churn of shows that start and stop. So we've got about, I think it's like 60% of the 1.8 million podcasts in the Apple Podcasts directory that are actually active shows. So it's not as huge. Now, granted, that is close to 1 million shows, or about 1 million shows that are active on a global scale. But if you think about how many blogs there are, it's like 100 million or something like that. So we're a long ways from being saturated. And I do believe that there's genres in the podcasting medium that really haven't been fully expanded on. And, frankly, also every one of us is a unique voice and brings a unique perspective and a unique opportunity to podcasting. So I don't think that there will ever be too many podcasts.
I think that's really beautifully shared by you, because it's always about this mentality of a abundance mindset, right? Rather than a scarcity mindset. And even though there are so many websites out there, but people are still building new websites. So it's the same thing for podcast shows as well. And it's never about having too many or it's too squeezy, right now. And it's like everyone is going into it. I think that's always a good sign. That means that this is where the action is actually happening. And of course, the medium of choice for maybe last year and of course this year as well, 20 and 21 and beyond. So, but it leads to the next question about revenue. What are the different revenue models of podcasting, and what they may actually look like going forward, especially this year, which is obviously also affected by the pandemic, which isn't over yet. It's going to be here for at least a year or two. So, what's your hot take on that?
Well, I think podcasting is primarily, let me just set the groundwork, is primarily a non-commercial medium. When it started, it was kind of like, it wasn't cool to have advertising or any kind of monetization linked up with your show. So that is the culture of the original medium. But over the years, we've evolved into accepting more and more monetization strategies into your podcast, which makes sense because it takes effort, time to create quality podcasting, and people would love to be able to convert that energy that they have into something that they can make a living with. And that has always been a tension in the medium since I can remember. And so I think for the vast majority of people that produce podcasts, the path toward revenue has many steps, and there's a lot of viewpoints on that. I think that a lot of people immediately think advertising, right, as the model that everybody's aspiring towards doing, which makes sense because it's a free medium, and kind of like broadcast radio, that was the model that everybody thinks of. But there are other ways of monetizing your podcast, and also other ways of getting value from it for yourself, either professionally or with a business that you already have. So there are, most of the podcasts that I've done, except for my radio show that I started, have never had advertising in it because it always had a different strategy or a different goal for doing it, right? If it's to build brand, build my reputation in my career, that can actually have a direct revenue benefit too, because I can get a better job. I can make more income by building that brand reputation for my knowledge and things like that. So you have that end of the spectrum, and then you have other models that people have tried, like the donation models, where people just put a link to PayPal on their site and say, please support the show and give $5, give whatever you can give to help support the show. And then there's other smaller shows that have gone down and really targeted a niche, and they're really drilling in on a niche topic area that they can bundle and package into a presentation to a brand or a company that maybe has a very compatible customer and listener kind of partnership there that can drive a conversion to new customers that you can just go out and pitch directly. But larger shows at the other end of the spectrum, which is the larger commercial podcasters or the big company podcasters that people oftentimes think of, those models are usually built on CPM models, which is cost per thousand of audience listeners or cost per thousand downloads over a 4-week period of time. And most of those shows that participate in that are typically larger shows. So ones that are probably 5 to 10,000 or more downloads per episode over a month period of time or a 4-week window can be packaged up. And more we're seeing monetization happen around dynamic ad insertion through programmatic ad buying, which is also a offshoot from online radio, online streaming radio, and the radio industry coming into the podcasting and saying, well, we have these technologies that exist to support, the streaming music platforms or whatever, and we're going to convert those into supporting podcasting through dynamic ad insertion. So that's really the spectrum of ways to monetize podcasting, and it's really up to your creativity on what you want to do and where you think your show is in that conduit. And many shows will do some combination of all those things, or they'll do a freemium model, or they'll give away a few episodes and they'll put some of them behind a paywall that you have a subscription model around. So there's a lot of ways. So it really depends on what your goals are and what you want to accomplish.
That's fantastic sharing. And of course, it's always the number one question, especially when I have to, maybe share about what I do with people that I meet the first time, for example, and they found out that I'm in podcasting, the first question they always popped up is, how to actually make money doing this? And of course, there are so many creative ways, right, around doing what you love, doing your content, doing your, having your dream of getting your dream guests, like your heroes on your show, and then trying to monetize it so that you can quit your day job and just do this full time. And of course, so many ways to earn money, so many ways to make $1 million for those who are interested, if their goal is to make $1 million, right? Even a Patreon model, a donation model, or a monthly subscription allows that revenue to come in drips and drabs. And of course, it all accumulates and it all adds up. So I thank you very much for sharing this different types of monetization models. And of course, we also touched on briefly about the impact of COVID as well. How has the COVID-19 situation has had, in terms of the impact on the space of podcasting? What are your thoughts about how it will also impact on podcasting for this year?
Well, when COVID first hit, what we saw was everybody kind of stayed home, and they shut down everything, and people were now not commuting in the car anymore. They were changing their life behavior habits. They were spending more time with their families at home, and so typically podcasts are consumed when people are mobile, on their phones. But what we saw happen when the pandemic hit was actually an increase in the number of people wanting to create podcasts, because people felt like maybe they had a couple of extra hours in their day that they could squeeze in. They've always wanted to create a podcast, but they didn't feel like they had time to do it. So we saw a huge spike in March, April, May, June of new podcasts being formed. It was well over 100,000 per month during those first couple of months. And then I also saw a decline in listenership for a month or two as well, because people were readjusting to their new schedules. They were having kids at home, and they were spending more time as families together, and so less time probably that they could dedicate towards listening. Plus, there was a lot of shuffle around how people were doing their jobs. So I think attention got pulled away from podcasting to some degree for a couple months, and then it started to come back again. So a couple months in, people started getting into their normal, different routines, but their routines again, and they started fitting in podcasting again, and it started to pick right back up again. And we're back up to actually surpassing where we were before the COVID campaign now. So, and the number of podcasts coming into the medium is about 85,000 a month right now on a global scale. So it's still significantly growing on the content creation side as well as the listening side. The advertising revenue side took a little bit of a hit as companies readjusted their priorities around advertising in certain genres of content based on the adjustment of people's buying behaviors when they stopped going to local businesses and maybe started buying more online or those kind of things. So you saw a ramping up of certain advertisers advertising in the medium, and you saw declines of other ones. So, yeah.
That's a great sharing again. And of course, these are always changing, and the situation of COVID is also always changing. So it's really difficult to predict what's going to happen this year and beyond, right? So I'm going to maybe back it up a little bit and ask you about how you navigate your career, because we know you're a veteran in the industry. And of course, you probably have many superhero stories to share with us. So I'm going to maybe jump in and ask you, what ignited your passion about what you do? And how did you finally ended up as VP of Content and Partnership at Libsyn?
Well, it's been for me, it's been close to about a 20-year journey on this path. I mean, I went to college and got a degree in marketing, and started working professionally in the marketing area early on in my career. And so I got involved in, working on advertising campaigns and with radio and television, billboards and promotional stuff. This was many years ago. And then the internet formed back in the late 90s and into the early 2000s. And, being marketing minded, I was thinking, this internet thing with the web could be a huge opportunity. So I jumped into it and started participating and built websites back in 97, started utilizing it as a marketing medium. And then more and more I got sucked into, video and audio starting to be streamed in this medium now too, with companies like Real Networks, and then Microsoft and Windows had Windows Media, and then I was helping on part-time basis. I was helping small companies get into the search engines to help promote their business because I could see that coming, and that I really started to embrace it as a marketing medium for myself, and that's how I got pulled into it. And I just thought one day I would, this local radio station in the Seattle market didn't have anything talking about technology or what was happening with the internet and the web, and just walked in and asked them, would you want to have a radio show about this topic? And they said yes. And I started doing a radio show and did that for 6 years. It was called the Web Talk World Radio Show, and built that as a syndicated model up to XM satellite radio network for a couple of years, and was on 15 broadcast stations, and did a lot of online distribution of it as well. So that got me sucked into that. And then I started building my own server infrastructure to host my own show, because it was picking up in popularity. And back then there wasn't any Lipsons or anything like that. So I had to start distributing my own show, and then I started helping others distribute their radio shows online. So I was like building a little mini Lipson back before Lipson existed. And so eventually I started moving into doing this, working on platforms professionally, and took me to Microsoft, and took me to Podcast One, and Spreaker, which now is part of iHeartRadio, and helping podcasters and helping the industry grow too. So, and that's what got me here. Is I left Spreaker to go to work for the first podcast hosting platform to ever exist. It started in 2004. So it's great to be here.
Fantastic career story. And did you have to hustle in the beginning to build a resume for what you do now? Like, did you also have to give up like a high, paying job or career to do what you love right now?
No, actually, it's been slowly building as the medium has grown and developed. Each position that I had kind of stepped up to the next level, and stepped up to the next level, and I just progressed like a normal career would. But I've been working professionally in the back end, publishing and distribution for podcasting for 16 years now, or 15 years. Yeah. So it's been a significant portion of my work career has been devoted to the podcasting space. So it's a unique opportunity, and I feel very fortunate that I had that ability to do that, because I know a lot of people would have loved to have had that kind of career path, especially these days.
That's fantastic. Having an opportunity to do what you love and then climb the corporate ladder at the same time. That's always a dream for everyone, right? So before we go, because we have 5 more minutes left, I definitely want to pick your brains further and ask you for your advice. How do podcasters actually make their shows better?
How can they make their shows better?
How do podcasters make their shows better?
I think podcasters need to really focus on what they want to do. I know a lot of people talk about trying to create a show that they think their audience wants. But at the end of the day, that podcast needs to be what the podcaster wants. I'm a firm believer in passion drives this medium. And if you get yourself off track too much, I believe that's what causes a lot of people to pod fade, which pod fade is a term to describe they start a show, and then over a period of time they do it less, and then eventually they stop. So podcasting is a passion project. Now, granted, a lot of larger companies view it as a professional medium. So passion is, I think, viewed by larger companies as a little bit less of an influence in what goes on. They tend to make it a little bit more like how radio has thought of content, which is kind of like a formula that you create and you bring in talent to fill those different slots. So, and there's definitely a place for that in the podcasting space, but I think at the core, podcasters need to stick to their passions and stick to what they want to do, especially on the independent side. And there's huge opportunities to build large audiences as you build your reputation and your network of people that listen to your show, and empowering those people to be successful too. And a lot of people in this medium spend a lot of time focusing on those areas. And I think it's very important to the health of the podcasting industry is to have a lot of people that are helping others and then inspiring others to succeed in life and to succeed in their passions. And at the end of the day, that's what podcasting is really all about. That's really how it started too.
That's fantastic. And, we also want to talk about what you mentioned earlier, right? It's always important to help one another and take care of one another. That's the importance of having and building a community, right? So you've actually, served the international community by having this podcast academy. So, and it's not just primarily focused on the United States, right? So what will be the plans of the podcast academy in the future? Will they be, seeing more action in this part of the world, especially in Asia?
Yeah, I think it kind of depends. I've had a lot of feedback from various groups and people from around the world about the Academy and what they might want to see there. I don't know that the Board of Governors has really decided on a specific pathway for that yet, but we're certainly open to ideas about how that might work. There's been talk about chapters that would be formed of the Academy in various countries around the world, and maybe there could be, each country can have its own Podcast Academy Awards type of activities in their own country, because I know that there are many podcast awards that are outside of the US currently that have been very successful and run very, very well. So I think that there is a need for recognition of content creators in individual countries, because the orientation to the market of podcasting is a little different in each country. And so there's a unique pool of content creators that exist in every country, and they need to be highlighted too. And it may be difficult to highlight every great podcast in the whole globe at one award ceremony. So I think that may be, as you look to the future, kind of what we would like to see happen. It certainly hasn't happened yet, but a lot of terrific podcast awards exist outside of the US right now that are doing a fantastic job of that.
So fingers crossed, and hopefully there will be plans to make the first stop maybe Singapore, where I'm based.
Right, or Europe, or all over the world. Right.
Yeah. And highlighted, I think across Asia, there's so many fantastic podcasters that I've got to meet also in person, especially after I started this festival. And some of their content are just, thrilling to hear, actually amazing. And the content out there, deserves to be highlighted. And of course, an award always puts them, in the right spotlight, right? So thank you so much for coming on to the show, Rob Greenlee. I finally, it's a dream come true to talk to you in person. No, virtually. Hopefully the next time when we do this will be an in-person event. Hopefully we can fly you over to Singapore. And
I would love to. Yeah, I would love to fly over to Asia and go to a podcast conference and get involved in something like that. And I think I was very close to it over the last year until this COVID thing hit. I was actually planning on going to Australia and going to Europe. I mean, I used to work for Spreaker, which was based out of Europe. So I used to go to Europe a lot more. But yeah, I would love to go to Asia and get that market moving more too. And I know you're doing a terrific job of bringing attention to podcasting in Asia too. And I appreciate that.
And I appreciate you so much, Rob. So thank you so much, and hopefully see you in Singapore very soon.
Okay, thank you.
Bye. Thank you, my friend. Bye-bye. So who do we have here? Dave Keine. I hope I pronounced your name correctly, because I remember it's supposed to be pronounced along with shiny, right? So Dave Keine.
There you go.
All right. Okay. That's what a relief. I always hate, if I get name pronunciation wrong, especially for my special guests like you. So how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you today?
I am fantastic. I've been up since, I think, 3 p.m. because my body clock is like upside down these days. I'm like on New York time. So it's like I'm going to do this all the way until morning, and then maybe take a short break in between and continue in the afternoon again. So,
oh man,
so great to have you here, because this is a really fruitful week, and we can't wait to have you, head of product and marketing at Podchaser, joining us. I've been waiting for this moment for weeks. So welcome again.
Thank you for having me, and I hope you've got some water or some coffee or something to keep you going through all of this. That's a long time to talk.
Exactly. I'm surrounded by Red Bull, coffee, and tons of other beverages to keep me awake. So hopefully, I don't have a brain freeze moment. Just need to continue to grind and keep myself awake.
Absolutely.
You oversee the direction of the Podchaser, and also you are entrenched in the podcast community. Yeah, so you focus on powering podcast discovery. And before Podchaser, you founded Triangle Content, right?
Mhm.
Maybe start off with that. What's the story behind that?
Yeah. So a long time ago, I worked in advertising and worked primarily in digital and radio. And around that time, podcasting was coming up. So I just kind of figured out what was going on in podcasting. This was back in the early days before it really blew up, and just started calling everybody, calling producers, people who worked at agencies at the time, networks, and learned as much as I could. Eventually turned that into selling podcast ads, and eventually into creating podcasts. So I did that in the agency world, and then started my own company, Triangle Content. Produced a couple shows out there, got about 2 million listens in our first year. And at that point, I had been talking to the Podchaser guys for a long time. I used Podchaser as a platform to really grow my own shows, get the word out there. And they had an opening for a head of marketing. I liked them a lot, believed in the product, believed it was going to grow a lot. So jumped over here. And ever since then, I've been working on the marketing side of things, working on the product side of things, growing the platform, really just trying to serve creators, serve listeners, and really connect them when it comes to discovering both through browsing, but also organic traffic, and kind of have like a social aspect to our website as well. So yeah, that's kind of how I got here. And yeah, I think for your audience, just to give a little bit of a plug to Podchaser real quick. If you're not on Podchaser, go to podchaser.com/claim your podcast, add data to it. We're kind of like an IMDb for podcasting. So you can go on there and really use us to help people discover your podcast by adding data, getting reviews, all of that stuff.
And we definitely want to expand on this topic about the IMDb for podcasts, which is what Podchaser is known for. Maybe you can walk us through how Podchaser was founded in 2016 by Bradley Davis, and also a small team of like-minded profession, or should I say podcast enthusiasts, with the goal of building the IMDb for podcasts, right? So why is an IMDb for podcasts so important?
Yeah, so we started, I think this will answer the question of why it's important. So we started with Bradley, our founder, co-founder, posted on Reddit one day looking for an IMDb of podcasting. He had been listening to a lot of Tim Ferriss podcasts, and Tim Ferriss podcasts can be 2 to 3 hours long. He wasn't sure if something was good before you hit the play button. He didn't know if the episode was good. So he wanted to have ratings on not only podcasts, but on individual episodes. He found a lot of people who were looking for the same stuff. He found our other co-founder, Ben, who lives in Australia, who could start building it. And really that's where things started. It started as a way to rate individual episodes and podcasts. Over the years, it has now turned into closer to an IMDb style website. So everything that you would do on an IMDb to find movies or films. So you might go on there to see, is this film rated well? Is this TV show rated well? You might also go on there to see who is in this. Like, is Brad Pitt in this movie, or who is that actor? So you'll go on there, and then you might go in there just to find stuff to watch. So we do all of that on the podcast side. We have ratings and reviews, which is where we started, but then we released podcast credits. So we credit over 8.5 million hosts, producers, guests, editors, all the people involved in the production of a podcast. We let users come on, create shareable lists. You can follow your favorite podcast to get notifications when there's a new episode. You can follow other users to see what they're listening to, what they're reviewing, follow creators and get notifications when they're a guest on a new show. All of that is wrapped into this gigantic, like huge, comprehensive database that then populates the website. And all of that is now searchable by Google. Google loves us. You search business podcasts, it's going to come up with Podchaser lists or Podchaser pages, all of that. So that's something to understand about Podchaser, is that we're a website, not an app. And that's for a good reason, which is we are able to unlock our database to people who are searching on different platforms. When we also talk about Podchaser, one of the things that's interesting is we're agnostic, which means we don't have a dog in the fight when it comes to a specific platform. We don't have an app for that reason, even though we're available on all platforms and any device, and you don't even have to log in to look at anything. We don't have an app because we partner with apps. We take our data that's gathered from RSS feeds and other places, and we take our user-sourced, crowdsourced data like credits, and we feed that to other apps. So if you go on to Podchaser and you leave a rating and review, it not only shows up on Podchaser, but it shows up on Podcast Guru, on Player FM, on places like that. So it's kind of a central distribution point for podcast discovery data in that sense.
And I have many superb CMOs who come on my other content pillar, the CMO Asia podcast, and they always love the ability to do SEO backlinks. And I think that this is a godsend for podcasters to be able to get their shows linked to different individuals, companies, brands, and of course, having this database always there, right? And it's so easy for people to, do references or to look up a show and a particular guest and get your show discovered that way. I think it's wonderful. And of course, we know that Podchaser recently partnered up with Podcast Taxonomy, which is an international multidisciplinary collaborative standard for recognizing roles and credits in podcast production as well, right? Can you expand a little bit on this particular partnership?
Yeah. So Podchaser and a staffing company called Staff Me Up organized the podcast taxonomy, I think in like late spring of 2020. And the goal behind it was to get the industry on board with, okay, what do we call these people? The people who make podcasts. For each role, like what is an editor? What is the difference between an editor and an audio engineer? So what we did is we organized it. We got people from across the industry, from I believe 40 different companies out there. We've got about like 70 people in the group now. And we got people from Spotify, Apple. We have creators with places like Wondery, but we also have independent creators, people from across the world, several different countries, different backgrounds, all of that. And what we did is we met for months and months and months, collaborating on what are the definitions of these roles. The goal here is to standardize the industry, to bring out opportunities for not only credits, but also for things like job postings. So how do you know if you need an editor? How do you put into a description that makes sense if you want to hire somebody like that? How do we make sure that this is an inclusive thing that covers the wide diversity of podcasts out there? Because you can have podcasts that are somebody making a podcast in their room by themselves. They're doing the recording, the editing, the production, all of that. But you can also have somebody who is, working for a $300 million company like Wondery and making, really super highly produced content out there. And they may be working on just a small piece of that. So we tried to get people from across all of those backgrounds. And then what we did is, after months and months of collaboration, we published a white paper, which is basically goes through all of the definitions, how we arrived at them, all of that stuff. And it's all open to the public. Anybody can go and look at it. It's not a company or anything. It's just an organization that we put together. And the goal for podcast taxonomy is for it to be a living, breathing document. So we have people who are constantly joining the taxonomy consortium, which is kind of like the collaborative group, and having conversations all day about, tweaking this word, tweaking that, adding this role. And so we'll be releasing more and more editions out there. And we will continue to be bringing more people on. If you go to podcasttaxonomy.com, you can join us. You can download the white paper. If you're a partner with us, you can grab a badge and put it on your site as just a way to say like, hey, I follow this. It's a great way to just give people credit, show that you're involved in the community, and really take things up in that.
Giving people credit is always a great move. And I'm going to maybe dive into the more marketing aspect or the marketing questions, because you're my favorite tribe. You're head of marketing at Portuguese. But before that, the point to this particular question is submitted via LinkedIn. We have an audience in LinkedIn who have already started submitting questions. So he's asking, hey, Dave, so according to you, what makes the podcast better?
That's a good question. There are 1,000 different things that make a podcast better, right? What comes to mind immediately is when we talk about audio quality, that can be a big signifier to your audience that your podcast is something worth listening to. I would say the space between bad audio quality and really good audio quality is actually pretty small. You can go on to Amazon and get a $25 mic and get good enough. Now, to get from like good to great, you're going to need gigantic microphones like this. You may need, I know you've got the Rode mic there. I've got a Rode mic here. You can get a little bit up there, but really just investing in that kind of first level of audio quality really helps a podcast sound a million times better. After that, you're going to get diminishing returns that are still great, but you're gonna reach there. So I'd say the easiest thing you can do is audio quality. Now, if you're talking about what makes a podcast better as a whole, I think it's treating it like you're creating a TV show. And I don't mean that in terms of like you don't need to be super well produced or anything like that, but creating the entire podcast helps a podcast be better. So start with the name, make sure that that's great, cover art, all of that stuff, but also think about like a website. Like a TV show would have a nice website that talks about, what you're doing. A TV show has an aesthetic to it. It has music that goes along that matches it. It has all of that stuff. When you get to show notes, really think about making your show notes clear and easy to read, just like you would at the end of an episode, you see the credits roll by. When you go to prepare for a podcast, Don't think that you're just going to get onto a mic and talk for 30 minutes and it's going to be amazing. Even the best conversational podcasts take a lot of preparation. You prepared, my background, and that's why something like this will work. So just treating the whole thing as if it is very important, treating it in each way of preparation. What are people going to think when they see all of this, and just taking a holistic view to a podcast. It's really easy to get started, and that's awesome, but it can also be an excuse to be lazy in a sense. And you can kind of lose some of the quality that goes along with making a holistic medium that people are going to want to listen to.
Fantastic sharing. And suddenly you're evoking a comment by one of my previous guests on the inaugural PodFest Asia Festival, where he mentioned, his name is Evo Terra, podcast.
Oh, yeah, I know Evo.
Yeah, he says that podcasts, they get the number of downloads and listens that they deserve. So it's like, if you don't have a good artwork for your podcast show, you don't have maybe a strategy or even a good execution to dress it up, to package it well, so people, have more chance of not just discovering it and then, just click past it, but because they see your artwork, right? And it doesn't look like it's something that's designed from Microsoft Paint, for example. Immediately, they will be more encouraged to actually click on it and listen to whatever content is behind it. So that's why I think you are the perfect person to answer this particular question submitted by our audience, because you're a head of marketing. My favorite tribe who basically don't have good taste in terms of how to put out a show properly and how to dress it up, how to package it well, how to actually reach a maximum number of audience as possible. And of course, in terms of how you're also integrating social and of course, crushing it in other aspects as well. So this question is more in terms of like the development of how show marketers, or should I say even podcasters, right, are now marketing themselves and getting their names out there and getting seen, getting more visibility so that people will actually check out their show.
Yep.
Do you hang out more in Clubhouse these days, or?
I am one of the lowly Android people, so I can't get into Clubhouse. I'm left out. There's a sign on the door that says I can't join.
You shock me, because most CMOs they swear by iOS devices.
Oh no, I'm on Android. I'm on a Mac computer. None of my ecosystems match up.
Okay, maybe you are the exception, because you might not be an iOS user, but of course that Clubhouse thing has really taken 2021 by storm, right? Everyone's just posting their rooms on LinkedIn, for example. Are you really venturing into that space, right? What are your take on it from what you've observed so far?
I think it's something I'm really interested in. Obviously, it's taken off, and a lot of people are seeing it as not necessarily a competitor to podcasting, but potentially something that is going to divert some attention from podcasting. I kind of see it as potentially the opposite. There's a lot of people who have heard about podcasting, who want to get into podcasting. In the US here, it's still something like only maybe like half of the people listen to podcasting, especially on a regular basis. So we need to convince that other side of people to listen to podcasts. Clubhouse has been great for getting people to get into the audio space, right? To understand, hey, I can sit here and just kind of, listen to something for a while. A lot of people tried a podcast in 2010 and didn't like it and never tried it again. So I'm interested in that. I think for promoting your podcast, it's a great way to have engagement. So podcasting being a kind of one-way medium is great. And I think there's definitely room for that. But Clubhouse can be something that supplements all of that, where there's something we call the podcast growth funnel, right? And it's kind of taken from marketing or product, the same way that you might have like in a pirate funnel with awareness, acquisition, retention, and referral kind of stuff. For podcasting, we have a growth funnel, which is at the top, you've got discovery, just letting people know that you exist. Beneath that, you have, okay, I want to try this podcast, getting somebody to not only see your podcast, know about it, but actually hit play and listen to it. From there, the next rung on the funnel is to follow the podcast, to listen to it again, to become a subscriber, listen to multiple episodes. And then at the base of it is you want to create evangelists for your podcast. You want to create a community that then goes and refers other people to it, because how do people find podcasts? They find it either through the Google search bar, but more likely they find it because their friends recommend it or they saw it on social. So you want to get to that bottom of the funnel so it feeds back into itself. So Clubhouse, I think, is a tremendous way to build that community and to take those people who are your fans and take them from being merely followers and turn them into evangelists, to referrers. People go out there and try and, go out there and recruit other people to listen to your podcast. And so definitely something that you should be paying attention to as a podcaster.
That's great advice. And I've been paying a lot of attention to it. I've also been watching less Netflix as a result of it, because it's quite addictive. Yeah. And you actually covered all the funnels that a marketer should know about promoting your podcast. You mentioned also about growth marketing, product marketing, awareness marketing, and of course, growth marketing, right? So it would be great for us maybe to expand more on that in the later segment of this particular program. Maybe could you maybe help us with this particular question that is posed by another audience? Rakesh asked, hey, Dave, what is the best way to monetize your podcasts? Are you the person to answer this particular question?
I can give opinions. I've monetized podcasts before, and it's it's difficult because there's so many ways to kind of that people look for to monetize a podcast. You can look at advertisement, you can look at Patreon. Those kind of stick out as, the typical path that a lot of places take. Where it gets hard is it's not as hard to monetize a podcast as you think. You just have to get creative, right? A lot of times it's easy to understand, if I want advertisers on my podcast, I got to wait for, like at least 20,000 listens per episode before I can sell that to an advertiser, at least through an agency. You can probably do that lower if you're selling, to a smaller company. But at that point, you're also maybe making, maybe $100 per ad, if that. So it might not even be worth it for you. So sometimes you get into that sense. Patreon's a great one, but there's a friend of mine named Luke Bronner who did a presentation at PodFest America. And he talked about all the different kinds of creative ways that you can monetize a podcast. And a couple of them are things like merch. You need one listener to buy merch, and then you make some money there. It's also a great advertising tool. You can use tools like TeePublic, which we actually have an integration on that you can add to your Podchaser page, that allows you to add merch and add designs by artists who aren't you. So a lot of people may look at merch and it's like, well, I don't have time to make a t-shirt or something like that. You can actually go on TeePublic and browse through designs that you think your audience would like. Say you run a baseball podcast and you find artists who made really cool baseball designs. You can add those to your store, bring people there. You'll make a commission off of it. Add it to your Podchaser page. It's a one-stop shop kind of thing. So merchandise is one of those. But then we get a little bit more creative and we can do things like local events, put a tip jar out, go to your local brewery or restaurant or something like that, or place where they would typically have like a musician, maybe do a live show, put a tip jar out there, interview people there. You can make money that way. Holding contests in your community is another great way. Charge an entry fee. If you're a business podcast, have them, spend $50 to come pitch you their business idea, award a winner, give them a prize, keep the rest of the money, stuff like that. So also there are services now popping up like Red Circle or Supercast, where you can go on and you can actually start monetizing a podcast from day one. They can do that through ad injection, or they can do that through special links and all of that stuff. So there is no best way to monetize your podcast, but I would say as people start, there's more ways to monetize, and you can monetize quicker than you think. Doesn't necessarily mean you need to. If you want to focus your attention elsewhere, you can. And then for larger podcasters, there's more potential revenue sources than you might think as well. So I'm not an expert on monetization by any sense, but that's kind of what I've learned throughout the years. And I really suggest if you go on Twitter, look up Luke Bronner, hit him up, send him a DM. He works for Milieu Media, and he can share his deck with you. It's a phenomenal deck.
So we should all go to the Google search bar and just type in Luke Bronner, right?
Yep.
Immediately find out the show. Yeah, I super like your sharing your opinion about how to monetize a podcast, because you mentioned about t-shirts, and it's something that I absolutely love. In fact, I'm wearing a t-shirt of one of my favorite bands that I watched. I think when I was in Sacramento a year and a half ago. The band is called Baron Altar. The reason why I brought up or show off this t-shirt is because I remember the band more deeply after buying the t-shirt. If I had not purchased the t-shirt, perhaps the relationship between me and the band Baron Altar would be maybe more distant. Probably I wouldn't care whether they're going to release a new single or a new video, yeah? But because I bought a t-shirt, and it's like wherever I go, I'm showing it off. So if a podcaster wants to really monetize it and even grow a deeper relationship with their fans or listeners, a t-shirt is actually a great way to go. And Podchaser actually has that particular feature that allows this merch to be purchased, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, you can go on there, claim your podcast, and then you can add merchandise to your page. Then it's a one-stop shop for leaving ratings and reviews, buying your merch, following you, all of that stuff, opening in other apps. But yeah, you hit the nail on the head with merch. It's a really easy way to monetize, but it's also free advertising and it's community building, right? It's creating that connection between you and the podcaster. It's getting them to go walk out all the time and show off, your brand. Other people are going to see it. It's going to start conversations. I think merch is a terrific way to support a podcast in a variety of ways.
Exactly. And they are also increasing in prices. I remember I was at a tool show, and I remember the first gig I attended, the t-shirt was only $30, but it's risen to 55. So it's like definitely a good way to monetize if a podcaster is looking for ways to actually grow their revenue so that they can quit their day job, right? And they just go into podcasting full time. Anyway, you have provided this particular right spelling for Luke Bronner. That's the name to Google immediately after this program. Before we let you go, I think we have only 1 minute left. Just squeeze in one last question submitted by our audience. I think this is the one that Nilesh has submitted. Just one more question. How can one do the preparation for a solo podcast?
Yeah, so there are, I can talk to content on this one. So if you are creating a podcast, I think the important thing is to spend time thinking about the podcast before you hit record. There are a variety of ways you can do that. Researching your subject is obviously one. It depends on the type of show, but also even kind of mapping out kind of what you want to say in that podcast, the different segments you want to hit, making sure that when you do a podcast that way, you're not jumping around from one to the other the same way that like I might do that in an interview like this because I'm thinking of it off the top of my head. If you can have some time to kind of plan it out, it'll still be, improvisational, but it will also be a little bit more coherent, and we can all speak better, so to speak. So yeah, taking some time to do that. On the other side of things with, preparation for your podcast as a brand itself, I think one of the things that you really need to do as a podcaster is understand that people want to listen to your podcast. They just don't necessarily know your podcast is there yet. So going through and creating a kind of persona of who your potential audience is. So say, again, I start a baseball podcast. I need to think about who my audience is. I need to think, okay, so my audience is going to be a guy in middle America. He's going to be around my age. He's a fan of baseball. He probably likes sports in general. He probably watches ESPN. He listens to these other podcasts. When he listens to my podcast or to a podcast like it, he's doing it because he wants to stay up to date on the latest news, all of that stuff. You start building that person up in your mind and thinking about who they are. And what that allows you to do is then when you do go to plan the content or plan, the cover art, all of that stuff, you're making it for this persona rather than just to your own taste, which is really hard to do. Sometimes we make stuff for ourselves. Everything that comes out of our mouth that we say is going to, for the most part, make sense to us, but it's not going to make sense to other people. So running it through that filter of who is the potential audience, or who am I writing this for? Who am I creating this podcast for? Because ultimately that's what matters. That's the difference between us speaking to ourselves in our closets and us actually having a podcast, is that audience. So think about what they are looking for and speaking to them, and meeting their needs is really important.
Fantastic sharing. Thank you so much for sharing all these, and of course, sharing with us your platform, Podchaser, which is useful for anyone looking to learn more about podcasts and discover new ones, right? Where visitors don't just learn about someone's own podcast, but see others on which he or she has appeared on. So thank you once again. I hope to invite you back for our February event, so we can maybe squeeze in more questions from the audiences and maybe more questions about marketing next time, yeah?
Yes, absolutely. I really had a lot of fun. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Dave. See you very soon, my friend. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Our next guest is Harry Duran. Oops, I think I just accidentally activated my Siri. Or okay, never mind. Let's continue. The next speaker that I'm going to announce is actually someone by the name of Harry Duran, and he's waiting in the backstage of this podcast studio. And just to maybe make this introduction more, formal, he's the founder of Fullcast, and Fullcast is a full service done for you podcast production and marketing consultancy. So in this one-to-one 30-minute conversation that you're going to hear and watch live next, Harry will tell us the story behind his brand, his business name, and why he opted for the domain fullcast.co and more. Okay. So without further ado, let me add him to the stream. How are you keeping, my friend?
Hey, how are you doing today? Thanks for the opportunity to share my story.
I'm feeling fantastic. It's great to see you with a green screen. I think that's not your real study room, right?
No, just to sometimes need a change of scenery sometimes because you're in the same place 24/7 and you feel like you need to travel the world. I found a website the other day that shows you driving on the roads of international destinations. And then it's like you're in the car, so you can see the screen. It's like you're in the car moving, and then on the side is the local radio station as well. So you can get, and it's got like 30 or 40 countries on there. It's pretty fun. I'll drop it in the chat later.
Fantastic. I think it's always great to get creative with, Zoom background screens, right? And for this particular show as well, it's like everyone is always saying, Wayne, why is your background always the same? Like featuring your living room. I'm like, okay, I know it's super boring. Maybe I'll mix it up the next time, right? So Harry has actually shown us how to actually do it the right way. I'm going to just kick off and jump in with the first question. What is the story behind fullcast.co?
So it probably goes back a little bit before because I started a podcast in 2014 called Podcast Junkies. It's a bit meta, and it's a podcast where I interview other podcasters. And so just up to episode 245 as of this week. So almost 7 years having intimate 1-hour conversations with people in the podcasting space. And it's been a fantastic way for me to grow my network and get introduced to people in the community. The story behind that is that I grew up DJing vinyl turntables. I love electronic music. And so I started a mobile app in 2012, 2013 called Know Your DJ. Funny enough, the website is still up, but the app is not working. I don't know why they haven't taken down the domain, but I'll put it here in the chat. People can check it out. It's basically a Pandora for electronic music because I go to festivals and I meet all these people and these DJs, but I didn't know their faces. So it was an easy app to have their Twitter, their Facebook, their Instagram, and people could check it out. And so one of the things I wanted to do was start a podcast because I wanted to interview these DJs. There's a website called Resident Advisor. They had a really good podcast. I was like, I want to do what they're doing. I want to interview DJs. So I go to this conference called New Media Expo in 2014. It was bloggers, podcasters, and YouTubers. So that probably dates itself. And then I saw these podcasters that at the time were doing interesting things. Cliff Ravenscraft, Amy Porterfield, Pat Flynn, household names in podcasting now. And I had an aha moment. I looked at my phone. Someone mentioned the concept of being a podcast junkie. And I was like, well, I got 30 podcasts on my phone because I was learning about mobile apps. I needed to it was a fascinating way for me to learn about podcasting. Previous to this, I had thought a podcast was a DJ mix because I came from the world of DJing. So when someone said, I have a podcast I want you to listen to, for me, it was going to SoundCloud and downloading listening to a 1-hour DJ mix. It was only until 2013 that I realized oh, there's other things happening that are called podcasts. So it was really interesting time for me. And so I came back, podcastjunkies.com was available. I grabbed the domain. I grabbed John Lee Dumas's course, Podcaster's Paradise, and I just figured out how to learn the things that I didn't know. And I just got my mic working, got everything up and running. What I did that was really important, Wayne, from day one, is I did video. At the time, it was Skype and call recorder. I knew that these people had no idea who I was in the podcasting space. So I said, okay, if I'm going to ask people to be on the show, I want to at least build my network up in the space because I was coming from corporate. I was in corporate for 20 plus years. I worked at JP Morgan Chase and E-Trade in their marketing departments. And so learning the world of digital marketing, podcasting was new. It was I call it digital Narnia. I walked into the closet, I came out, I was like, what landing pages, sales scripts, lead magnets, all these things that, you take for granted now if you're in digital marketing. I literally knew none of that. So to expand my social network, and I did that by having an hour-long video conversation. So I started getting these early adopters in podcasting, people like Elsie Escobar from Libsyn. People. I eventually started to speak to people like Pat Flynn, Jordan Harbinger, Cliff Ravenscraft, Gary Nealon from all these podcasters who've been doing it like 10 years. And I was just like, wow, because I thought it was late when I got there in 2014. And so what happened is I started having these conversations, and I would go to podcasting conferences, and they would say, "Hey, Harry, thank you for that really, really in-depth conversation." And I decided I wanted to become a student of the interview. And I think it's an ongoing thing for me. I'm fascinated by people who do it and do it well. It's not easy, but there's certain skills that you need if you're going to engage with your guests. You have to be an active listener. You have to have a passion for the topic and have an intense level of curiosity, because I always say there's three people in a conversation. There's the podcast host, there's the guest, and then there's the listener. And people always forget, like in a conversation, you have the listener, like and in this case, the people watching this show right now, this conversation right now. Like, we don't want to leave them out of the conversation. There's always people following along, and we want to take that into account. And so I did that, hired a coach. There was a lot I didn't know about digital marketing. Like, I would go into this room and people were making like 6-figure, 7-figures with digital marketing businesses. And I was like, my jaw hit the ground. I was like, you can make $1 million like with an internet business. Like, I couldn't understand the concept, wrap my head around it. And I had to just really swim in the deep end and just like, oh, I want to be around the people that are doing things. Around that time, I started watching a lot of like inspirational videos. There's a guy by the name of Jim Rohn. He said, and he's one of the guys who actually taught Tony Robbins. He says, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And I was like, wow, my social circle is completely limited because I'm coming from a corporate background. Like, I don't know people that have created $1 million businesses. Like, I don't know people that have worked in digital marketing from like all their careers. And so it was clearly a lot that I didn't know. And so I had to educate myself, be around these people. If you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. So I very quickly realized I needed to up my social circle, and it's just proved extremely helpful. All that to say that that's where I got the idea for Fullcast. It's the abbreviation of Full Service Podcast, and it's an agency where we assume we work primarily with businesses, and we assume people are starting from zero. So we handle all aspects of the setup, the audio production, and the social media marketing as well.
Very interesting sharing. And of course, I brought to mind immediately, like, if you want to change the pace you are running, right? Change the people that you run with. So you mentioned about surrounding yourself with all these people who have already crushed it and already been, successful in what they do, and just learning from the greats, right, will help you to, be better at your game. So, I have some questions that I've prepared for you, especially when it comes to even like social media, or like places where you hang out these days. Are you seeing more action, in Clubhouse versus Lunch Club in 2021? Because I do see you quite regularly in Clubhouse.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's a bit of shiny object syndrome. I'm fascinated by all the entrance of these new platforms that are specifically focused on the audio experience. And as content creators, we have to sort of think where our specialty lies and where our strengths lie. So if you grew up writing, you love writing, you're passionate about it, then you're likely going to have no problem churning out a weekly blog of like 3,000 words, right? If you are comfortable in front of a camera and you just are natural with coming up with content immediately, like something like a Facebook Live, Instagram Live, those are your, they lend themselves well to your talents. But for some people that just like speaking and don't really want to be in front of a camera and just can like talking to people, that's where podcasting comes in. So I think people gravitate towards the content that they create easily. And what's been interesting about Clubhouse is, like everything else, you have to moderate the time you spend on it, because obviously the biggest complaint is the alerts. Like, I'm pinged and getting invited into rooms all the time, but you also have to put a premium on your time. And are you going to be there to just try to build an audience on someone else's like rented land? Like, what they say is it's never a good idea to build an audience there, because if Clubhouse shuts off tomorrow, all those people with 10,000 followers, what are they going to do? But what I like about it is the ephemeral nature of the platform. It's technically not that you can't record easily. You have to sort of make some connections on your computer, and you have to let people know that you're recording. So that's the first thing. But as a podcaster, or as someone who's thinking about podcasting, even easier than Anchor, because it's what a lot of early podcasters do. They jump on Anchor because it's free. Go on, now you can go on Clubhouse. You can get a small room. Be specific about the titles of the rooms, because there's too many generic rooms. Make millions, go podcast, be a brand leader, be an influencer. It's just a lot of like the hustle type stuff, and which I see, hundreds or thousands of people in those rooms, but it's just like all fanboy, fangirl stuff. And I think if you're a serious entrepreneur or someone serious about building a niche in a specific topic, like go in there and talk specifically about like, mental illness, if you're a coach or something like that, or ADHD, like be specific. So when people see the topic, they're like, oh, I want to go in there. And even if there's only 10 people in the room, start to use that as an experience. There's a skill to Clubhouse. You need to learn how to moderate a room. You need to learn how to reset a room. You need to learn how to have an engaging conversation with the people that are on stage with you. You need to learn how to get people up and off the stage. And you need to always be sure that the people that are watching, that you're taking them into account and bringing them along for the journey. And Wayne, those are all absolutely important skills for being a good podcaster as well.
Very good point. I think you nailed it when it comes to how to really crush it on Clubhouse, right? It is a new skill that even podcasters have to adapt and grow and evolve and be really good at it. Yeah. And I think no better way than to spend more time on the app and then just see more action and practice. So I have to ask you, about some of the shows that you have done, especially I understand that you have done the vertical farming podcast, and also you supported Michelle Coyle on the launch of the Queer Hustle podcast. So tell us, what are the biggest wins from doing these shows?
What's interesting about I'm grateful for the opportunity I've had to work with some of these clients. I've worked with, when I lived in New York, we did some work for Dun & Bradstreet. When I lived in LA, we did work for K-Swiss, the sneaker company based out of Los Angeles. And we work with businesses and brands because they need and to understand like how to best get a message out. What's interesting about a podcast for a business owner is we make sure from day one you have a clear call to action. I always ask clients, what's the one thing you want a listener to do as a result of having listened to your episode? And a lot of podcasters forget this. If you want to build a popularity show, good luck, because you're going to need tens of thousands, 50,000 downloads per episode if you want to monetize that using a CPM model. So for our shows, they don't always get that amount of downloads. Some of them get a couple of hundred. But what's important is that they're moving the listener to take the next step with them. It's saying, hey, did you like this content? Then download our lead magnet. And what that does, as you know, is puts them on the email list. And you want to get them to the email list as quick as possible, because like we talk about rented land, like you want to have that one-to-one communication with your audience. And building an email list is one of the first things we make sure clients do. So that's really important. And be clear about the content you provide. One of my coaches says you give them the what and the why for free, and they pay for the how. So it's really important to think about the content you're creating. If your podcast is meant to support your business, this is really important. Make sure the content you're creating is educating people and having them lean forward and understand how to take the next step. One of my clients, Carrie Granger of the Granger Network, she's got a podcast called Leadership Impact. What she does, she coaches CEOs on leadership. She considers her podcast episodes prescriptions. So when she'll have a conversation with a potential prospect that's a CEO and says, hey, it looks like you're having some issues with accountability. Why don't you go back and listen to episodes 3, 6, and 9 of season 2, and then schedule a follow-up with me, and then we'll have a further discussion about to see if my program's a fit. So if you think about that, that's the podcast is doing the heavy lifting. Like it's there, it's evergreen content, and this is something like your content should be valuable tomorrow. It should be valuable 3 years from now. With regards to the vertical farming podcast, it was a thought exercise for our agency. I read a book called Abundance from Peter Diamandis, and there was a chapter about vertical farming. And I said, this is an interesting topic. We own a production agency. I'm going to start a podcast called the Vertical Farming Podcast. Now, when we launch shows for clients, Wayne, I'm adamant about making sure that they don't get too fancy with their podcast names. Like the Two Guys in the Basement show, like it's cool, but no one's going to listen to that. I'm sorry. Like, the mental health podcast, that's great, but it's not specific about it. Like, some people don't like to hear like hard news or tough news about like no one wants to hear your generic show about two guys hanging out. So we're very, very specific and strategic about a name. My partner is a photographer. We launched a show for a couple of years ago that helps photographers launch and build a photography business. Guess what we called it? Photo Business Help. Like it is what it says. Like when people see the name of your show, it should cause an immediate reaction in them that says, oh, that's something I need, or that's something I want to listen to, or that's something I want to learn more about. So I grabbed if I wanted to start a podcast about vertical farming, I called it the Vertical Farming Podcast, and I grabbed the domain verticalfarmingpodcast.com. So now if you Google those 3 words, vertical farming and podcast, my show is the number 1 thing on the first page of Google. It's just those little things. And I think as podcasters, we overlook the obvious. The name of your podcast episodes. Use blog SEO best practices that have been around for like 10 years. Don't reinvent the wheel. Like your title of your podcast episode should be something that makes people lean in. So what I did is I grabbed all the socials before I even launched the show. I started engaging as the Vertical Farming Podcast on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on Instagram. And now like I was building up a following before I even launched the show. And then what I did, Wayne, is I started interviewing CEOs and founders of these vertical farming companies. And I went straight for like the top. I didn't want to talk to a marketing person. I didn't want to talk to a PR person. I wanted to talk to the CEOs. And in the beginning, it gets a little harder. But what I did was explain to people, future guests is like, my plan is to speak to these 10 influencers in vertical farming, and they would see the names and they're like, okay, I'll give you a chance. And now that I've had those people on, I've had the CEOs of the biggest vertical farming companies in the world, like Aero Farms, Plenty, Bowery Farms. Like these are, multi-million-dollar companies. And I have a relationship with them because I've had a 1-hour conversation with them. But the best part about it, Wayne, is that I was able to secure a sponsor for the entire season of season 1 before I launched an episode. And the reason is because they understood the value of a niche audience. And I was only speaking to CEOs and founders of vertical farming companies. So it became de facto an industry podcast. So I keep repeating this and until I'm blue in the face. Like if you're going to start a show, there's 1.7 million podcasts in the Apple Podcast directory. Like be specific, like go niche. And if you think you're niche enough, go even further niche and be like the number 1 podcast. Because if it's a topic you can't talk enough about, then you should be the specific, the thought leader for that space.
Fantastic. I think niching down, like what you mentioned, and of course, crafting even a monetization strategy way ahead of even the first season or the first episode by attracting sponsors, to your show that is named after the vertical that they are in, and even getting the guests to become your sponsors. This is fantastic. It's brilliant. And a lot of podcasters actually forget about that. And of course, if their goal is to go towards monetization, this has always, these are very important for them to succeed from the get-go. And if this is not their goal, then perhaps this is something they can leave alone. Yeah.
Yeah. It's very important.
How to establish a human-to-human connection with all your guests, especially all the CEOs and C-suite that you mentioned, right? And then you master like deep conversations with them and actually make them feel at ease and eventually even sponsor your program.
Yeah. I think you have to care, Wayne. You have to I think people treat their podcast like a transaction sometimes, and they treat their guest interviews like a transaction in terms of like, what am I going to get out of this conversation, or what am I going to get out of this person? I have this mantra that says, treat your guests like gold. Like when I go into a conversation with someone that I'm meeting sometimes for the first time, and I'm going to have that podcast interview with them, I imagine what it would be like, how I would be differently. What would my energy be like if I wanted to build a relationship with this person that was going to last me for the rest of my life? Like, what would I do? Like, I would be more curious. I would be more empathetic. I would ask follow-up questions. I would ask about things that matter to them personally. I would take an interest in the answers they give back, not sit there like with your notebook and just waiting to ask the next question, because the listener can feel that energy. Like, you've heard podcasts, when the podcast host and the guest, they just feel like, oh, these people don't know each other. This is an awkward conversation. Like, you can hear it. And so if you come with that intention to be like the best, to have the best interview possible, to build a genuine connection with that person, maybe that's it. Maybe after that conversation, that connection is over and you guys will never speak again. But in the case of my show, like, for example, I've got relationships with people that it's still, 6-7 years later, like, we're still friends. One of my guests on the Vertical Farming Podcast, he's like, wow, that was a great conversation. I feel like I just want to give you a hug after this conversation, because we just went to some places that, most people don't go to. So it's not a formulaic. You shouldn't try to like manipulate the conversation and get people to like cry or anything like that. But just be genuinely curious. Like I always say, if you go into a bar, there's 50 people in the bar. There's 50 stories there, Wayne. There's 50 people that have a story to tell. If you just ask the right questions, every single person is going to, tell you an aspect of their life and maybe something they've never even shared with someone else.
What is your take on podcast ads perform, host read ads outperform?
I think it depends on the nature of your show. Like if you have to, at the end of the day, when you make a decision like that, Wayne, you have to what's best for your audience. What's the best thing? Like, is it a host read ad? Is it dynamic ads? I really lose a lot of personality, and you can do dynamic ad insertion obviously as host read, but in the beginning, you do the things they tell you this in the startup world as well. You do the things that don't scale. And that's the same thing with your podcast. Like do the things in the beginning, like get that one-to-one relationship. Like for example, I have an opportunity now because you brought up this topic to give a shout out to my sponsor on Podcast Junkies, Focusrite, which is the maker of the Scarlett 2i2 sound card. And I've got a direct relationship with Dan Hewley there. And I value and treasure that relationship so much that every opportunity I get to promote him, even if it's not on the podcast, like they've paid for sponsorship on the podcast, but here I am talking about it on PodFest Asia because I value that relationship. And because not only do I mention it in my pre-roll and post-roll, but I tag him in Twitter. I tag him on the newsletter that I send out to my subscribers every week. I mention it to him on LinkedIn. Like wherever I'm promoting the episode, by default, I'm going to be promoting my sponsors. And this is the value that you can provide as a podcaster. Your platform is not only your show, it's all your social media combined. And so when you're offering that up to a sponsorship, don't just mention downloads, especially in the beginning, because they're not going to be high. You should say, hey, sponsor, I value your relationship, but you not only get access to me as the host of this show, you get access to my, 6,000 connections on LinkedIn. You get access to my 3,000 people on Twitter. You get access to my mailing list of thousands. You just build this up, and before you know it, your platform numbers are in the tens of thousands.
Fantastic. I think these are beautiful sharing. And so far, it has been effortless doing this program with you. We have only 5 minutes left, so I better rush through my other questions for you.
Yeah.
Well, what are your favorite topics from the team at Headliner Video, where I think they recently highlighted 7 trending podcasts, marketing topics in that from 2020, right?
Yeah.
So I remember seeing your posts and you asking other people for their favorites. What is your favorite?
From a marketing perspective for podcasts? Yeah, I think
that's correct.
I think to the extent that you can be genuine in sharing your show in a way that highlights your guests. So like when I promote, for example, I think it's something that people don't take the time to do. Like if I'm promoting a guest, I'll look for other ways to promote their appearance. And it's just been crucial. It's the little things like tagging them. Like if you're going to post on LinkedIn, go to the trouble of finding out how to tag your specific guest on LinkedIn. If you're going to promote it on Twitter, like go to the trouble of finding out what their Twitter handle is. When we do an intake for guests on Podcast Junkies, we have a form they fill out and it says, Wayne, you're going to be a guest on Podcast Junkies. What's your Twitter? What's your LinkedIn? What's your Instagram? The reason we ask that is because we're going to tag them, and we also ask them to upload a headshot. So you never want your guest working harder because they've already done you the service of being on the show. So little things like that, like the experience your guests have with you from day one, from the moment they first interact with you, is really important.
Fantastic. And of course, before we let you go, squeezing one last question. Where do you see your business in the future? And how does your brand name, in fact, I think Podcast Junkies is a great name for a podcast. Yeah. Fullcast.io is a brilliant name for a company. So how does your brand name fit into those vision?
I think if I have I want to be all things in terms of when people come and engage with the brand Podcast Junkies. Like I want to tell the stories. I'm fascinated and excited about the topic of podcasting and seeing where it's growing. So my podcast is now the platform for that. And with Fullcast, I have a mission to help 1 million people find their voice. And so the way to do that is by creating shows for people. I'm not going to reach the million directly myself, but if I can build shows that get tens of thousands of downloads, that network effect, that magnifying effect helps me to get to my goal faster.
Brilliant. It's been great, having this conversation with you. And I think you're my tribe because you also read the Resident Advisor, right? So I'm also a big fan of all kinds of music. Not just, death metal, but I love electronic music as well. I love Aphex Twin. I love Attacker. Yeah, so I always go there, Resident Advisor to get the latest content. And of course, you are my tribe because you used to be from a DJ background. Now you are DJ turned podcaster. So many things to like about you, about what you do in Fullcast.io, and of course, your Podcast Junkie show. So tell us how we can reach out to you, and of course, for our audience as well, where can we hit you up?
Yes, I'm really active on LinkedIn and Twitter. I'm making a bigger presence on Twitter. If people need some just an overview, sometimes this has been helpful for me. I struggled so much in the beginning chasing down YouTube rabbit holes for figuring out where to find information. So just if they download the game plan, they'll be added to my email list. I try to build and send out a newsletter once a week and have that one-to-one conversation with the people that are in my community. So it helps me practice my writing. And it's helpful for people to share and understand what's helpful for them. So we all are in this podcasting journey at different points. And I think I applaud you for what you're doing, Wayne. And the more voices that can get out and be ambassadors for podcasting, I think at the end, that's going to be a great thing. We all want to see podcasting succeed. We have to communicate to like our grandmother and our friends what a podcast is. And the more people that can do that in a way that's trustworthy and respectable, and with honoring who came before us, and excited about what's to come, I think that's all going to be the rising tide lifts all boats.
I think it's a great way to close up the show. It's also a great way to close up the show by sharing a link that you shared with me, which is fullcast.co/game plan. Everybody go check it out. And of course, there's another link that you shared on LinkedIn, which I think you mentioned about why it is important to be reminded that we get stronger, not weaker, by engaging with ideas and also people that even that we disagree with, right?
Yes.
And tuning out opposing viewpoints does not make them go away. So you have been quite inspirational, and I follow you on LinkedIn because of the content that you put out, not just your fascinating podcast program. So thank you so much for agreeing to do this with me, and I hope to re-invite you back, and hopefully we can actually do this in person in the future when we do an in-person event finally in Singapore when it's safe for you to travel. Yeah,
that would be great. Thanks, Wayne.
Thank you, Harry. You have a nice day. Cheers. Bye.
You too. Bye.
And that's our program. We are not going to wrap it up yet because we have another panel that's coming up after this. It's with the team from behind Desolation Center, which is a music documentary about a festival that was actually held in the desert. And the festival organizer actually agreed to come on to the program to talk and also walk us through why he came up with such a fantastic film, why he actually organized the desert music festival in the first place. So it's also a nod to all these favorite music film documentary from our PodFest Asia community. And it's also one way for us to connect with other tribes as well, not just from the podcasting realm, but also musicians and alternative rock bands that we listen to, we grew up listening to, and of course inspire us to be creative in the first place and to do podcasting. So watch out for that. In the meantime, we have half an hour before that panel comes up next in our festival. We're going to do a replay, but I think before that, I think Ray has just joined us. So let's say hello to Ray. Hey Ray, how are you?
Good. Thank you.
Great to see you. I think the last time we interacted was actually in Clubhouse. Yeah?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Exactly.
So let's give our audience, a full introduction. And I think I can actually read this and introduce you fully. We are actually very honored and also thrilled to have our first Korean-American podcaster. Yeah. Okay. And you have your program called a Social Ray Podcast. So great to see you joining us live. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks for having me on. Did you want me to share what that's about, or what do you want to talk about? Yeah.
We definitely want to hear, the story behind the Social Ray Podcast, like how you started with that program. What was your agenda or your goal, of actually having a podcast like that? Because we know that your background is actually in social media. Yeah. That's why you're one first to jump into Clubhouse. So maybe walk us through with your story behind the Social Ray Podcast.
Yeah, so I grew a lot of accounts on Instagram, and I was connected to these people, have like hundreds of thousands to millions of followers, and I wanted to just interview them, hear about their story, and hear how they got to where they are, and how they built such a large, massive following. And so that's kind of what it started out as. And I also love to just chat with people, network, and just hear their stories, And so I love to I saw people like Lewis Howes, he's a big podcaster, and these other guys just interviewing people, sharing information, sharing, beliefs and thoughts that are valuable. And I was like, I want to do that myself. And I want to be able to meet these amazing people through the podcast. And so that's kind of why I started it. And since then, I've been able to interview like a lot of entrepreneurs and influencers, which is kind of crazy because I never thought I'd be able to be in proximity with those types of people. But I just put myself out there, and it's just opened up a whole new world to me. Rather than just staying in med school and like, getting a regular job, which isn't bad, but I just wanted to see what's out there in the world, not just be limited to what society and school tells me that like these are the only degrees you could have, these are the only things you could do. I just always wanted to do something outside the box and something that's meaningful to me instead of just following the traditional route. And yes, it's not easy, but nothing's easy, right? Even going to school, getting into hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt, that's not easy either, right? And so yeah, that's kind of what made me go off that traditional path to do entrepreneurship, social media, podcasting, and now social media coaching. And yeah.
Yeah, funny how you brought up, student debt and of course all these establishment schemes, right? And of course, we're not going to judge that. Of course, there are various ways of making money, and I think your entrepreneurial path is inspiring. And of course, doing this through podcasting obviously has actually helped you to actually interact or come, face to face or virtually with your heroes, some influencers out there who are really crushing it in this field, right? So I understand you have grown over 1 million followers by just learning how Instagram and its algorithm works. So how has that actually, worked out for you in terms of the newer social media apps that are the rage these days? We're talking about Clubhouse, right? Are you trying to also build a following there? And is that where you see more action these days?
Yeah, so like Clubhouse is one, and that's a good one because there's a lot of, people on there who are like quality people. TikTok is not as TikTok is good too, but it's a lot more short form content. But yeah, I would say just the earlier you adopt these platforms, the faster you could grow and try things out. And Clubhouse is cool because it's all voice based, and if you have value, people can recognize that and they'll follow you for that. Whereas TikTok, you could just post whatever and people follow you for whatever content you put out as well. But I haven't played around with TikTok so much, mainly Clubhouse, because there's more like entrepreneurs on there. But yeah, it's been really cool to try to do that.
How many followers have you amassed in Clubhouse so far?
Like 600, so not too much, but I need to be on there more for sure. So I'll pop in those rooms more.
It's like everyone's paying you to join, right? So it's like the temptation not to join is actually, it's like if I don't join, am I like fear of missing out, or am I missing out an opportunity to even amass more followers? I think that's what going through a lot of people's mind, especially those who are in the social media realm, right? So you mentioned about TikTok as well. So basically the two, what's your allocation in terms of time spent so far on both?
So TikTok, I don't spend too much time. Clubhouse, maybe a couple hours a week, but mainly everything is still on Instagram because I'm just used to the platform. But and just coaching people, because I started a group coaching program to get people to 10K, and just helping them with learning how to use Instagram based on what I've learned. And so I'm going to turn that into a course and then, eventually sell that. But yeah, I'm just just figuring things out as I go. I think the thing about entrepreneurship is there's no instructions, and it's hard because, school gives you a model, like, get this degree and then go to the school. But then entrepreneurship, it's like you kind of have to go out there and figure out for yourself what you want to build, what you want to create, and then go from there. But it's a lot more fun in my experience, and rewarding because you're creating something on your own rather than just doing what everyone else is doing, which isn't a bad thing, but yeah.
And it's like having to figure this out on your own. Normally, that's a lonely journey, and it's definitely filled with many obstacles along the way. So to be able to learn from an expert like you who have, amassed 1 million Instagram followers, I think you are one of the people that we can actually lean on to if we want advice on that area. So just like we were talking about Clubhouse, TikTok, Instagram, when starting off, it doesn't really matter how small your following is, right? What matters is the impact of an entrepreneur's vision or a podcaster's vision. What would be your advice for those podcasters who are trying to nail it, in these 3 particular apps?
Giving value, because what one thing I've learned as an entrepreneur is a lot of the world is about like just taking or like what's in it for me. But the thing about entrepreneurs is they think about what can I give and how can, and even if it doesn't come back to you like through money or something, it'll always come back some other way. So always think about how can I give value on these platforms, not just like what can I, because there's some people, it's surprising, they DM you and they have like really nothing to offer, but they just want to take from you. They're, oh hey, give me a shout out, or hey, do this for me. It's like, yo, like you haven't even done anything to for me to even want to help you, so you gotta like offer help first and offer value. And so whatever platform you're on, like offer value, and just be consistent. Yeah, consistency is key for sure. And just you got to have a passion for it, because social media is a long-term game. Like if you're not, even podcasting, if you're not passionate about what you're doing, and if you don't, like I didn't go to podcast for the money initially. Obviously I want to monetize it, but then like if you don't have a passion for what you do, then you got to rethink about what you're doing. Because there was this video that I posted on my Instagram, like we're born this amount of time, and then work consists of like 50, 60 years, most of our life, and then we die, and retire. And so you got to really think hard about what do I want to do for most of my life, that I could keep doing and that I have a passion for, instead of just working for a paycheck just to pay the bills. Obviously you could do that, but think about what's my passion. Like even for you, like doing this thing, podcast is just not easy, but you obviously have a passion to, share knowledge and inspire other people in Asia with entrepreneurship podcasts. Excuse me, podcasting. So, even for you, setting this up isn't easy, but you've already been an hour and a half in. And so it shows, it takes commitment, and it takes drive. And if you're not passionate about what you're doing, then it's easy to give up. I think Steve Jobs said, you have to have passion about what you do, because any rational person, they would give up. So if you're like rational and you're like, why am I doing this? You're going to give up because it's so hard. It's so hard that you're going to give up unless you're really passionate about what you do. So, I would say have a passion for it, and, don't give up. Yeah, if that's what you want to do.
Something you said earlier really resonated, like people hitting you up with DMs and asking or doing the ask all the time without even offering anything, right? So I think we all also face the same kind of experiences, like people who DM and say, oh, I want to come on to your podcast show, or I want to come to your festival, demanding to be on. Yeah. And without sometimes even saying hi.
I know. So
we all face, and we struggle at times. Is like, I should actually hear this guy out, maybe just ask a question, like how can I be useful, right? But sometimes it really takes 2 hands to clap. And how the universe works is that we need to actually bring something to the table for everybody, and not just always be taking. Yeah, and it's always a wonderful thing to be able to give. And of course, to be able to give, to be a giver is definitely something that is a gift that we all possess. And of course, if you can give more, even better. But sometimes there's always different approach and different right ways of doing things and doing the ask, right? So how would you actually advise, podcasters for those even beginners, or those who are just considering of starting a career in podcasting? What would you advise them in terms of like why is it really important to make sure that when they're growing their influence, it's always for the right reason?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's actually why I first wanted to build my Instagram and following, was because, I saw that there's a lot of people who have an influence, but they're not using it for like a good purpose, So some of these people, like there's a guy, he had like million followers, and he would just post videos of himself stealing things from stores and robbing. And I was like, dude, that's so stupid. Like he doesn't deserve that amount of followers, but yet, there's someone like Mother Teresa or someone like who's doing good work, and they're not getting any exposure. So it's like, how do we get the influence to the right people, to the good people? And so I that's why I started to build my influence and my podcast, because I was like, we need more messages that are like uplifting and building people up in this world. That's why I like people like Lewis Howes or Joel Brown, or just these other people who are spreading good, positive messages. Nicholas Bailey, he's a guy I've helped out with Instagram. But yeah, it's like we need more people who are who have a good heart and good influence to stand up, because I think Martin Luther King said this too. Evil prevails not because there's no good men, but when good men do nothing. So it's kind of like, there's the people who are greedy and money hungry, power hungry, like fame hungry, who are like getting all this attention. But how about the people who are, wanting to make a good difference? They're like kind of passive. Some of them, not all of them, I realize now. But yeah, so I guess to answer your question of what beginning podcasters, I would say just start where you are, because I know it can be really daunting, especially starting out, and you're like, why would anyone want to talk to me or be on my podcast, right? Things like that. But like for me, I wasn't thinking about myself. I was just like, I want to hear them and their story, and I want to share that with other people, and so even if it was just one person or two people who heard it, if that's enough and if I'm good with it, then you should do it. But if you're like, hey, like the people who are like, oh man, I'm gonna get 10,000 people to listen all together, it's like you got to build slowly. It's like growing a plant, you can't grow it overnight. It has to be over time. So just start where you are, start small, and then just be consistent, and just believe in yourself and in what you're doing, and yeah, start from there.
And most importantly, just start, right? Although it's okay, but always start small, but most importantly, to just start. And a lot of podcasters or those who want to start on podcasting, they always have a problem of actually starting. And I actually have many friends who actually been talking about doing a podcast for 10 years, and they still haven't got around to doing it yet, because some of them will actually use excuse that, oh, it's because I have a job, and monthly salary is like a drug. It's like, I want to keep my job. I don't want to do my passion project yet until I have enough and I'm retired. By then, the world has gone past.
Yeah. For those people, they should pay you or someone to coach them and be like, hey, can you coach me for like 3 months or 6 months on, how to do this? Because if they don't, you got to put your money where your mouth is. And also people like that, they keep saying that they're going to do it and they don't, then they're just lying to themselves. And they're never going to do it, because, your actions speak louder than your words. And so, and that's a trap. I don't know if you read Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. He said his rich dad said, don't ever take a paycheck, because you're being conditioned like a slave, almost like an employee, to just take a paycheck every 2 weeks and be okay with that. And you're never, and you'll be comfortable, and you're not going to be uncomfortable. So I would say, podcast is hard too, because it's hard to monetize early on. And I get that you want to be making money to pay the bills, but you got to just kind of jump off the cliff, and take a risk for you to really do something, because you're always going to say, you're always going to want to be comfortable, but yeah, it takes some sort of risk to make that happen.
100%, because podcasting is like the worst medium that anyone wants to choose to get rich, right? If you want to get rich, maybe try cryptocurrency, for example. Why podcasting? Yeah. But people do podcasting for various reasons. Like what I could see, your genuine desire to connect with the universe, to connect with your heroes, and actually to learn from them as well. So I think the next question is going to be segue really nicely for us as well, about discovering your why. Yeah? Because I think you mentioned in your Instagram or LinkedIn that people trust a person so much more or faster than they can trust a company, right? And as you gain influence, you also gain power. So always use it as a positive tool to elevate other people. So why is it discovering your why is so important before you start podcasting?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think this is the same for everything. I think people need to ask why about everything. Like, why do I need to get up today? Why do I need to go to work? Like, you don't have to do anything. You know, you really don't have to do anything with your life. And people think, oh, I have to get a job, I have to retire, I have to get a house. Like, you don't have to do any of those things. There's people like in North Korea or, you know, Bali, like they don't even, you know, they don't even have that idea of they could choose something, right? And it's kind of like, for them, they have to do what they have to do. But for us in America, it's like you have the freedom to do what you want. So really ask yourself, like, why am I doing this? Do I want to do this? And obviously, yeah, make money to pay the bills, but you know, what is the impact that I want to make? What's the legacy that I want to leave behind? And if you don't know the why, it's hard to keep going because you're like, why am I spending so much time, you know, on these podcasts and editing this? Like, why am I doing this? So it's important to know the why for everything that you do. And you know, for me, it's to like inspire my siblings, like people around me, that it's possible. Like, I used to have depression, social anxiety, and I came, you know, with divorced parents, and it kind of like came from a dark place where I could have just been like, you know, F everything and let me just, you know, do drugs and let me just, you know, do nothing with my life. But instead I was like, you know what, like I want to make something of myself. I don't want to just, you know, let all my pain and sorrows lead into nothing and just work for someone and build their business. You know, I want to make an impact, you know, with what happened with my life. And so that's and I want to get my voice heard because when I was young, I didn't get my voice heard. And I think podcasting gives people a chance to get their voice heard, which is great for those who felt like they weren't heard before, you know? So
Podcasting has actually saved my life. I think to a certain extent,
Really?
it has saved yours, right?
Yeah,
You
I'd love
mentioned
to hear about
like
that. Yeah.
depression, about, you know, having divorced parents, and of course these are all the phases and the kind of even the dark times that everyone has to go through, at least, you know, I wouldn't say once, you know, 100 times in their lives. Like, tragedies will just keep piling up as you age as well, especially when you see your loved ones, you know, pass away, or your friends, you know, due to poor health as well, and they struggle. And so, like, podcasting has saved my life in a way because it allows me to have a voice, like what you mentioned. It allow me to have a creative expression outlet as well, and invited many new opportunities that comes along with podcasting. So it's never about a monetization. It's never about making money from the beginning and actually thinking that if I don't make $1,000 for my first episode, I'm going to quit, right? That's never the point or never the agenda.
Yeah, and it's, you know, like money will come eventually later on, but it's like you said, you need to have a bigger vision and passion for what you're doing. And yeah, I mean, money, but it's hard. I get it, because money, like for me, I'm living, you know, at home with family, so it's easier. But if I was like, you know, having to, you know, pay rent and also all these other things, it's harder. It sounds ideal, right, to do stuff like this. So I get how people are like, yeah, it's easy for you, but you know, I have bills to pay out X, Y, and Z, which I get because I have things to pay too. But you know, just that's why it's hard, because people have to figure out the money part first and then they could do their passion. So you need to do a balance. You can't just only do your passion and not make any money. And I wish I knew that earlier on, but then you know, I'm still, you know, so I'm in a unique position, but I get why some people are like, you know, that's unrealistic for me right now. I just need to make money, which I get. But you could still, you know, interview people on Zoom like this, and you don't have to go and you don't need crazy equipment. My first podcast I didn't have like equipment and stuff. I just went to the person and was like, let's do a podcast, and we did a podcast together, you know. And so I literally just started without anything fancy, and just did it because I wanted to do it. And you know, it's the same for you. It seems like it's like, you know, you just have a desire, you go out and do it, instead of like, oh, I need to buy thousands of dollars of equipment and gear. Like, you know, it's just go and do it. And you'll, like you said, over time you'll learn and grow. But yeah, just you got to take that chance for sure.
Very inspiring. And of course, I have to ask you because your roots are in Korea, right? When was the last time you're back in Asia?
Yeah, so my mom lives in Korea. So my last time in Asia was, I want to say, like 2 to 3 years ago. 2 to 3 years ago. Yeah.
So you're from Seoul, I believe.
No, I was born in Sacramento and I was raised in Orange County. But yeah, I visited Seoul like 4 or 5 times. Yeah.
So are you fluent in Korean?
Yeah, I can speak. I speak Korean with my grandparents and my mom. But English with my dad and my brother. So like some of my family I speak English, some of my family speak Korean. So it's kind of funny.
So you're fluent in your mother tongue, right? Because you get to interact with your grandparents in your Korean native, your mother tongue. And have you ever thought about doing a show in Korean?
Oh, like doing a show in Korean, like talking Korean and stuff? Yeah, I don't know. That's interesting. Yeah, I never thought of that, but maybe I could do that. Yeah, that could be a possibility for sure.
That would definitely be maybe even your game changer. I don't know, because it's like it's fascinating to hear an Asian American, speak Korean and having a podcast show that becomes popular back in Korea. As a result of it, doing something that's uniquely different, right? Because it's so hard to cut through the noise these days, and probably you're creating your own category. And I'm not sure has anyone actually done a show. Maybe you can do a Social Ray podcast Korean edition.
Korean edition, and just speaking Korean, like, oh yeah, 안녕하세요, and like, yeah, that'd be cool. Yeah, I mean, I need maybe a co-host or something, but yeah, that's true. So there's a lot of things, but yeah, it's gotta take it one step at a time, and yeah, just go from there. I think for sure.
Yeah, just start. Maybe finding co-hosts is not that difficult. Probably on Instagram, many Korean people in Korea are already following you, right? All you need to do is
I don't know. I don't even know who follows me. So yeah, I just yeah, I guess so. But I just want to put out good content, like content that will make people better. And yeah, I guess you're right. There's not a lot of Korean podcasters. I don't know too many, but I just wanted to do it, and so I'm doing it. So
brilliant. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this with me. It's effortless doing a show with you. I hope to do this more often, and of course to find out what you're up to, with your Social Ray podcast, right? Tell us how we can actually find your podcast, and where can we hit you up?
Yeah, so it's on Spotify, it's on iTunes. Social Ray is one word. It's anywhere where you can find a podcast, pretty much. And then you could find me on Instagram at ray.ahn, ray.on. And yeah, that's where you could contact me or DM me and stuff.
Thank you, Raymond Ahn. It's been a pleasure talking to you. So maybe the next time we'll meet again is in Clubhouse. So I'll definitely ping you, and I'm going to do a program over there. So let's catch up again very soon. Yeah, my friend. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Bye, Raymond. Cheers. And that's Raymond Ahn, host of the Social Ray podcast. So coming right up, we have a really exciting panel. In fact, it's our first ever panel on this festival. This festival is only 2 months old, yeah? And it has grown from just having 20 speakers. Now we have more than 36 for this second event. And we hope to grow it to 56 speakers for our third edition, which is going to happen in February. So obviously it's going to be taking a toll on me, because that means I'm going to have less sleeping time or nap breaks in between different sessions. But of course, I'm doing this because I really love what I do, which is basically connecting with people, especially my heroes. And I think one of my heroes is in the next panel. His name is Shelley. He will be joining on a panel along with people like Mariska and also Stuart, someone that I actually got the privilege and honor to interview in the middle of last year, I think, during the height of the pandemic. And he came on my other content pillar, the CMO Asia podcast, and actually dropped a lot of nuggets and wisdom. And of course, his passion for the music that we all love. And basically helped me to get being able to discover a great film, which is Desolation Center. And Desolation Center is a movie that I think is the best music documentary that I've seen in the last couple of years. It's a film that I greatly encourage our podcasters to go watch, because I think sooner or later you're going to also have your own community. You're also going to build community and also being able to learn from people like Stuart how to build a community, how to actually build a festival as well. He's actually one of the singular, reason why I also, formed this podcast festival in Asia, Asia's first ever podcast festival. He's one of the reasons why I was inspired to do a festival in the first place as well. So I'm really excited to have him on. The clock has just, I think we're 1 minute away from 4:30 to prepare for them to come on. Just to introduce them properly before I actually invite them up on stage. Well, Desolation Center. This is a film where we'll get to ask the panelists, the story behind Desolation Center. And of course, PodFest Asia, for the first time, we're presenting this panel with some of PodFest Asia community's favorite alternative bands, favorite music, favorite documentary music films, along with director, producer Stuart Swezey and co-producer Mariska Leyssius behind Indie Desert Festival documentary Desolation Center and Sonic Youth drummer Steve Shelley. So we're super thrilled to add to the conversation about festival organizing, about alternative rock bands, about music, documentary films that inspire a new generation of creatives, especially podcasters like me. So Stuart Swezey, he's the producer and director of this Indie Desert Festival documentary that chronicles his early career organizing events featuring groups such as Sonic Youth, Einstürzende Neubauten, and more. So the film actually premiered at CPH, DOX, and screened at Sheffield Doc Festival in 2018, Slam Dance Festival in 2019, and has won multiple audience awards and Best Feature Documentary nominations. About Mariska Leyssius, she began a creative career as a photographer, musician, and pioneering zine publisher for Contagion in the LA punk and industrial rock scene. She was involved in the original Desolation Center shows and was a co-founder of Amok Books. While working at Island Records, she had the honor of picking Malcolm McLaren up at the airport and chauffeuring Marianne Faithfull around Hollywood. So Mariska was at ground zero of music video production and also has worked with directors like Julian Temple, for Neil Young, Tom Petty, and Kevin Kerslake, who produced videos for Nirvana. Steve Shelley is best known as the drummer of Sonic Youth. Pre-pandemic, he has recorded and toured with Thurston Moore, Lee Ronaldo, Spectre Folk, Hal Gelb, Mick Harvey, JP Shiloh, Gator Pyramid, and Rivera Gats, both based in Sao Paulo, Brazil. In the recent past, he has recorded and or performed with Yoko Ono, Malcolm Mooney of Keine, Yasmin Hamden, Peter Walker, and Mercury Rev, and various other acts and artists as well. So without further ado, let's introduce them to the screen. Mariska, hopefully you can see me. Stuart, so great to reconnect with you after so long.
Totally.
Hero, Steve Shelley.
Hey, Wayne. Hi, Mariska. Hi, Stuart.
Hey, Steve.
So great to see all of you. How are you guys keeping? And where exactly you are at this moment, right at this moment?
I'm in my house, strangely enough. There's still a pandemic here in Southern California.
You are the MOE podcast, the same house?
Yeah. Same view, So no, we haven't been out and around too much. So yeah, I'm pretty. If you really want to find me, I'm pretty easy to find these days.
How about you, Steve? Where exactly are you?
I'm in Hoboken, New Jersey, at my house where I've been for most of the last year.
Fantastic. And of course, Mariska, where are you?
I'm in LA at Venice Beach, and I'm home. Big shocker. So.
Well, staying home is not a bad thing. It allows us to connect with one another through screens like this, right? And I think without I don't want to say that, without the pandemic, right, certain things wouldn't have actually occurred or happened during the past 1 year. Although, of course, I don't like to see people dying, people getting COVID and all that. But we are all at home for probably a good reason, one or another. So I think Stuart probably was able to walk us through during the middle or the height of the pandemic and tell me a lot of fascinating stories about the movie Desolation Center, right? So it was almost half a year, and maybe you could help us by walking through those moments again. Tell our audience, our PodFest Asia audience, what is the story behind Desolation Center? Why Desolation Center? And does it have to do with Bob Dylan's 11-minute ballad titled Desolation Row on Highway 61 Revisited?
I'll take the first question last. Actually, not really. I just think it's a cool word that it was more of a vibe at the time, I think, for me, about kind of feeling that Southern California was very desolate as a place for young people. We were having a lot of problems with our law enforcement cracking down on particularly our scene of punk rock and anything that was perceived as punk rock back then. So we were able to put on live shows. And I don't know, I think I was also into the whole kind of like industrial culture, kind of, dark type imagery and factory records and Joy Division and whatever, So Desolation Center, just a phrase, but the film was really about stuff that Mariska and I were involved in, and then Steve as part of Sonic Youth as it moved along, really putting music events on in unusual places. And back then, the desert was not considered the place in Southern California where you did a gig. Nobody was really doing that. So we took people out in school buses, and all the people that you mentioned in the lead up, like I'm sure to know about in Sonic Youth, the Minutemen, Savage Republic. Eventually we kind of went from downtown LA out into the desert in the harbor around San Pedro. And then the last Desolation Center show we did was in downtown again, but in a very big kind of almost collapsing new old warehouse building. I mean, I'm sure to know about in his collapsing new buildings. And Steve played at that show with Swans. Mariska played that show, Saccharine Trust also. And so the story of the film is really about us kind of inventing this whole other way of looking at live events and music away from nightclubs and that kind of thing. Not that we were the first, and we definitely weren't the last, but it also is kind of about the spirit of DIY, indie music, indie labels, all the things that we were doing.
And Steve, what is your story? What is your take about Desolation Center?
Well, when I joined Sonic Youth in spring or summer of 1985, they had just played Desolation Center, and it was one of the biggest things that I heard about again and again in the in the van. Of course, the Minutemen and Meat Puppets were favorites of mine, and so that Sonic Youth played in the desert with Red Cross and with the Meat Puppets was a great story to hear about, and I felt like, wow, I really missed something. So I was happy that later in '85, Stuart put together one other Desolation Center gig, and that was the one in the warehouse with Swans and Saccharine Trust. So it was kind of just stuff of legends, as it still is today. And I'm so happy that Stuart and Mariska made this movie, because I'm happy that people can see this and learn about that this Southern California scene, based mostly around SST Records, but goes beyond that too. But just how vital and important that was in the early '80s, and it really inspired a lot of us to do what we did.
Brilliant. Mariska, how about you? What is your story of Desolation Center?
Well, I met Stuart at a tiny club, anti-club, which we would go 3 or 4 times a week. And it was, it's interesting. If you asked me today what I thought, or if you asked me 35 years, I don't know if it would be the same answer, because back then you just lived in the moment and you just did things. And we knew it was amazing, and I don't take it for granted. I was just lucky to be in that community, and it was just something we did, even though we knew it was amazing and was our little world. So being in the desert. But I grew up in LA, so I knew the desert more than most, probably.
because I'm based in Singapore, and I think Steve has actually toured or played a gig in Singapore before. He knows exactly how tiny our little country island is. We have never experienced desert right here in Singapore. So when I watched that film, is that the landscape, the scenery that actually caught my attention as well. The colors, and of course, when darkness falls as well, the mood changes so rapidly, right? And those are all, fleshed out with the music and soundtrack of the music of Sonic Youth and all these great bands that we grew up listening to. So, it's a very inspiring film, and I just hope to see it, be the success that it deserves. And right now, I think that many people have already seen it, have rented the movie. But of course, pandemic has affected the film industry in a huge way. Many shows are either now distributed on Netflix or OTT or other platforms, right? So how does the pandemic actually affect the distribution or the consumption of Desolation Center? Is it affected in any way? And what has changed since in terms of promoting the film and also talking about it and distributing it and making sure as many eyes, actually pay attention to this incredible movie?
Well, everybody's timing, I think, is different. I mean, we played these film festivals that you mentioned, and then we did a theatrical release, before the pandemic, where we were able to play in movie theaters, like art houses, I guess you would call them, and hopefully some of those will survive this whole situation because that was still a very vital scene. The last one that we did was in New York in Manhattan, and Steve had held out to see the film projected. So that was in February of last year, I think. Yeah, end of February. And so after seeing the film, I think Steve got inspired to get involved in the project and release the soundtrack. Where we had been talking about a soundtrack, he's actually moving us forward toward a double LP. And we're also going to be working with one of the people that was involved in the very first desert show, Bruce Leisher from Savage Republic, who's also a designer, owns his own letterpress equipment. But as far as releasing goes, I mean, my thought was once everybody was locked down, streaming became very important. So I was working with a distributor called Passion River, and they helped set up all those things like, iTunes and Amazon and stuff like that. And what I think when you can't show the film, the familiar things that we would do, like let's do a Q&A after the screening, you couldn't do that anymore. So we've sort of tried to do some virtual events and work with different groups and people like yourself and just sort of get the word out. Through Passion River, we were also asked to put out a DVD so that it could be in libraries, universities. And then we found that like our audience actually really likes DVDs. So we've put kind of I guess it's like the first version of the DVD. We're going to eventually do something with more special features and things like that. But it definitely has struck a chord. And so it's kind of cool to reach people in whatever way works for them. That's kind of my idea, is just to get it out there. We still had outdoor screenings, but they're very limited during the pandemic. I think they have like 25 people or something like that.
So for Steve, do you see like in terms of like establishing like human to human connection through either this movie or through your Sonic Youth re-releases or new releases, has the pandemic actually affected, or impacted how you actually interact or engage fans and actually get them to discover all these brilliant releases that I believe that you're now actually distributing them through Bandcamp at this moment?
Yeah, being stuck at home and being forced to work at home did change things, and so in spring and summer of last year in 2020, started working on these archival recordings and posting them on Bandcamp, and now it's grown into quite an archive up there. So it has changed how things have happened, and now we're trying to take some of those digital releases and make them into physical items because last year some of the plants were closed down where you actually couldn't make records and CDs, but now of course things have loosened up a bit, and so we're working on making physical items that we can also sell on Bandcamp. So obviously it's changed a lot. None of us are are out there touring and selling stuff at the merch table. So again, Bandcamp has become really, really helpful to a surviving musician.
How about Mariska? Has your work been impacted, greatly by COVID-19?
Yeah, I am in LA, and film is essential workers, thanks to many lobbyists in Washington. But yeah, we keep having lockdowns, and so work is. They're starting to figure out. I mean, I don't know if you're asking me about COVID, but they're starting to work out how to film safely. So I feel pretty safe, but definitely slowed down.
I just got to throw in that Mariska is a certified COVID safety officer. Not only is she a producer of commercials, but film. But yeah, so I always go to her first for questions, and friends of mine do too. Even for people doing independent film, it's great to have somebody who's actually working in the field. But as far as Mariska's been part of all of our social media stuff, the redoing the website. I mean, we've had a lot of projects ongoing just to kind of roll with where things are going with the film.
Yeah,
Fantastic. What's your? In fact, I want to ask the whole panel. Yeah, what's your biggest takeaway or biggest win by doing more Zoom, StreamYard panels? Like I seen you guys popping up every now and then, and every time when I see you guys on screen and I watch snippets of it, sometimes I can't stay throughout the whole 1 hour conversation, for example. But you will remind me, to go back and listen to that Sonic Youth record, or go back and watch Desolation Center again. Especially there are scenes there which are so riveting to watch, and it would be great to rewatch it. So what are your personal takeaways in terms of doing more Zoom StreamYard panels like this? Maybe starting with Steve.
I'm not sure what the takeaway is. It's usually if someone asks, I'm not that busy this week, so I'm available, and you hope to pass on some knowledge or some insight to what happened and what is possible. So it's kind of there for the viewer to take away.
Yeah, and 100%, because it reminds us also, to pay more attention to all this great archival material that are on Bandcamp. It's also reminding us to go rewatch that movie again. How about Mariska? Do you like doing Zoom, StreamYard panels?
Yeah, because being in front of an audience, it's right now I feel like I'm just having a conversation with the four of you. So it is less, I like that better. But we're always honored and flattered when people ask, because it's all about the audience. I just love that they get something out of it, because that was our intent, was to really inspire people to do their own thing. So it's always a nice thing to hear.
How about you, Stuart?
Well, I think it's one of those things where I'm curious about how situations and technology kind of affect where we're going. So for me, at first, it was super nerve-wracking. Like, I hadn't done it, and there's a lot of little technical things. And like doing the StreamYard thing for the first time with you, it was pretty straightforward. Then when a internet radio station called Dublab asked us to do something there, we finally decided, let's just go with StreamYard. So a little shout out to your host. But I think that some of these things are really cool, that the four of us can be talking and we're not all in the same place, but we're connecting, and so I feel like this format might exist even when we can start traveling again, or we can start, doing live events again. But so that's what I'm sort of hoping, is that the innovation that comes out of all this can be something that we can continue. And it does take, it takes some organizing, and it's like everything else. It takes work, and even the few panels that we've done, I always feel like we're spending a lot of time setting them up and who's available and all that stuff. So, hats off to you for keeping this going. So quite a schedule you've got going there, Wayne.
Have you guys heard of Clubhouse, this new app that is iOS only? It's like Zoom without turning your camera on. So it's like, I've been spending a lot of time on it, and it requires less setup, because basically you can lie down on your bed, right? And just open the app on your iPhone, and then you're in the summit or at a conference talking about your film, about Sonic Youth Records, for example, about co-producing. So it's like it makes Zoom more laborious compared to Clubhouse, right? Are you guys on it, Steve?
I've never heard of that.
Haven't. I just heard that they're like all these hip hop people jumping into Clubhouse and people are like going nuts or whatever. And so I've just been following it more as a news story than the latest app that I downloaded. A friend of ours was listening to the last thing we did, and we started talking about things that she thought was a little bit like sensitive, like psychedelic drugs and stuff. So she said, you got to download Signal, and because it's encrypted and so we're supposed to continue that conversation on Signal. But I have not gotten into Clubhouse.
I'm going to send you an invite, Stuart, so that maybe we can remix this show on Clubhouse. It's actually, a very easy way to do a podcast recording. It's like audio only, right? And you can basically just, naked and nobody knows, you're not wearing anything. So it's like probably another way for us to talk about. I'm sorry?
I said, even a bad hair day, you got it all covered.
Yes.
All covered, yeah. We have camera turned off, so that's like a blessing for everybody, even for me, So it's like, I'm gonna have to quickly move on to the next question because we only have like 10 more minutes with you guys. Which is your favorite topic, scene, or interview from the film? Of course, you guys have different perspectives because either you're directing or you're co-producing or you're being interviewed, right? So maybe starting off with Mariska.
Well, Stuart went to Berlin. I didn't go. So for me, that was my favorite because it was when I saw it for the first time, it was really seeing it for the first time. It wasn't like sitting through the entire interview in person. And he's just so funny. and that was also one of my favorite shows as well. So I'm just glad that, I don't know if he also has a cooking show. So he just makes me laugh.
She's talking about Blix the Bargeld.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Blix has a cooking show. It's hard to pin it down to one scene because there's so many. I still tear up when I see D. Boone singing on Joy at Sea boat. But
yeah,
that's my favorite.
Definitely great micro moments from the film. How about for you, Steve?
Well, there's so many, but I think I was pretty amazed when the lights were turned off for the meat puppets, and that was on film. I really enjoyed the psychedelic sounds of the meat puppets and what little you could see in the darkness in the desert. I really liked that moment.
How about you, Stuart?
Wow. I mean, I have to say, I love that Blixa was in the film, and he cracked me up, particularly the way it cut together. But I think Chandelier, who passed away, actually, he brought so many different aspects to it because he was really part of our scene, and he was a Black guy that was very gender fluid and a friend. But I felt like we interviewed him for like 4 hours, and I really got to know him in a way that you don't when you just see somebody at clubs. I mean, he had moved to Vienna by that time, and I saw him at a Red Cross show, and we're like, we got to do this, and then it wasn't too long after that he died. And I just really felt like he linked together so many aspects of it, whether it was the LAPD at the beginning, survival research laboratories, to, the way Sonic Youth felt to us, seeing them, most people for the first time and in this really unusual setting. So yeah, that would probably be my favorite.
He is definitely also my favorite. I think the scenes where he is featured, right? He moves me when he's relating experience or he's describing certain scenes, right? It felt really real, even though I wasn't there because I was too young to be there at the time. So I think this segues really well into our next diversity question. Why is it important to be reminded that we get stronger, not weaker, by engaging with ideas and people that we disagree with, and tuning out opposing viewpoints does not actually make them go away? What is your take on that? Starting with Stuart again.
Okay, so real quick, in the period right after doing the Desolation Center shows, Mariska and I and other friends in LA, part of the same scene mostly, started something called Amok Books. And so if you guys are in Indonesia, you know what that means.
crazy,
the
right?
whole idea was to do exactly what you said, Wayne. But back then there was no internet for most people. Certainly no websites, no social media. And so the idea was to kind of take this alternative culture and make it into a bookstore, mail order catalog, and disseminate this information. And we had things that are as, appalling and anathema as the ideas that led to the Capitol building in DC being taken over. But this was sort of that version of it then. Books like White Power by George Lincoln Rockwell, conspiracy theories, that were anti-Semitic and all that stuff. So I've been following this stuff. Not that that's all we had, but we had a little space for that, along with crazy science fiction and people like Timothy Leary and all kinds of other stuff. But I think it's important to understand what's going on in the world and to understand ideas and also to be open to where a good idea comes from. But it's so different now. I mean, a book is almost like not the way that all these kind of what I think are really fascistic and racist ideas are getting communicated. And I think that a lot of these people have never stopped to actually read a book, and it could be part of the problem.
Very good point. How about you, Steve? What's your take on that?
I agree with what Stuart said there, but I just wanted to mention historically, when Amok was started after Desolation Center, it was sort of a must visit place in LA for bands like us, for Sonic Youth. I always remember pulling up in the van and stopping at Amok and hoping that maybe Stuart's there. And maybe you often were there, but Amok was important, for outsider literature, underground literature, and for different ideas. So that was just par for the course back then. Everything was alternative because we were the underground, and so that was a great destination.
Brilliant, Mariska.
Well, I agree. Thanks, Steve, for visiting, by the way. One thing that was interesting was the juxtaposition of the books in the store. Like Stuart said, White Power, but then it would be next to Timothy Leary or something else. That was, I think, the dissemination of all the ideas. And
yeah, I mean, if there was
there
was one point of view, I think we were more anarchist, situationist, kind of in our own ideas, and that's what I would love people to take away. But we really, freedom of speech is something that we here in the United States still have a lot of value on, and so we felt like it was important to have that broad spectrum.
Great sharing, guys. We only have less than 5 minutes left. Can you believe it? I want to squeeze in a fanboy, Sonic Youth fanboy question for Steve. I hope the rest of you don't mind.
Go for it. Absolutely.
I'm a huge fan of Sonic Youth, massive fan since the time when you guys toured Singapore together with, I think, Beastie Boys and Foo Fighters for this tour in Singapore, in Asia. So I just want to ask you, have you heard Napalm Death's cover of Sonic Youth's White Cross from your 1987 sister album? I think it was on their Throes of Joy album that came out recently.
I did hear it. Yes. That's one thing about the pandemic. You have time to hear this sort of stuff as you start your day.
So what are your thoughts about that cover? And what are the weirdest cover songs that you have heard from fans around the world, including Asia so far, covering Sonic Youth songs?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, usually I don't know. I guess I should be happy that they do it, but I am happy that they do it. That someone's taking their version of our song, but usually I feel like they miss the point. Usually they have to do some sort of an adaptation to the middle section or the crazy section, and they never quite get the spirit of a Sonic Youth song. So I haven't heard a cover that has really blown me away. I think maybe Karen O or the Yeah Yeah Yeahs did a version of Diamond C that's really good, but those are few and far between.
You know what? I haven't checked out Karen O's rendition of that song yet, of the Diamond Sea. I'm gonna go catch it, because I remember talking to Stuart, when he came onto my podcast earlier. One of the best micro moments of my life was watching the Diamond Sea live, and you guys played like the best version of it in Singapore, and it was incredible. I'm like brought back to that scene when I was talking about it to Stuart, and now you're on the festival, so it's really great to have you, gracing this event. And there's so many ways we can all like elevate others, right? Lift others, or even like helping one another, collaborating with one another. I think this is what community is all about. And the reason why I had this PodFest Asia event in the first place is to bring on heroes like you, and people that I love, people that I admire and look up to come on the show and talk about it, right? So one of the things that I really love to collaborate with you, I think this is like a minor ask, or maybe a big ask, I don't know, Steve. What if I organize a Sonic Youth Tribute Festival featuring cover bands from Asia and beyond, and then live stream it for 48 hours? Would you be up for it?
What do I have to do?
Would it be on Clubhouse?
Do I have to stay up for 48 hours and watch it?
You don't have to watch the entire thing, just like this festival. Nobody will be, be able to stand 48 hours of me talking to people. You just show up, like in between certain bands, like maybe like from Singapore, right? This local band from Singapore is doing a Sonic Youth cover of Diamond Sea. And then before I introduce the next guest from Indonesia who's going to cover, I don't know, White Cross, maybe you show up in the middle and just tell us a little story behind that particular song. Would you be up for it?
Oh, yeah, let's do it.
It's a date. So
Yeah.
now on the clock, I'm going to start this Sonic Youth tribute event. It will be streamed live on virtual for sure. Thank you guys so much. You made my dream come true. And Steve, thank you for saying yes to this crazy idea. Thank you, Stuart.
Wayne, great to see you again.
Great
Enjoy
friend.
our conversation. Yeah.
You, Mariska, thank you for your input and your wisdom as well. And I really appreciate you and, sharing your stories as well.
Keep me posted on the Indonesian
I look forward
band.
to see you guys very soon. Indonesian bands? I'm sure there are tons of Indonesian Sonic Youth fans out there.
Her mom and
So
dad
thank you
from
guys.
Indonesia.
And the Indonesian audiences out there, give a shout out to them. One last thing before we go. The DVD, when is it available? And does it come with Chinese subtitles, Stuart?
Oh, excellent question. Wait, yeah, it's out. And we actually do have subtitles in Chinese. And, we'd love to get it to the Asian audience. They can contact us through the website, desolationcenter.com, and we'll hook it up. But the subtitles started with an Asian festival, and it's called the Urban Nomad Festival in Taiwan. And so they helped us with the subtitling and getting it all. So yeah, I think it's exciting.
And I think with Chinese subtitles, you're gonna reach so many Sonic Youth fans, or the festival fans, who's actually speak the mother tongue. Their language is Chinese. So people in Hong Kong, Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, even Taiwan, and all parts of China will be able to actually understand the movie. And it's great that you actually included us and included this language in your caption. So thank you once again, Stuart. And I hope to see you guys really soon. Please take care of yourself and take care of each other over there.
Awesome. You too, Wayne.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. And that's a wrap, guys. 2.5 hours of talking to different guests around the world. I think I managed to cap it off by speaking to my hero, Steve Shelley from Sonic Youth. Thanks again to Stuart for setting this up and allowing me to also table my idea of doing a Sonic Youth tribute virtual festival featuring Asian bands and beyond, covering Sonic Youth songs. So that's another festival to look out for. And I think before we go, just to give you an update of what's going to come up next on this festival. We have another 27 or 26 more awesome guests from different realms in terms of the podcasting world who are going to be joining us. People from the audio production houses, podcasters, podcasting hosts. We also have creatives and marketers, podcast advertising industry people, and of course the ad tech world people will also be gracing this event. So do tune in and rejoin us again. I'm going to take a short break, have a short nap, And make sure that I'm back energized after I had my breakfast again. We're going to have a breakfast session. We'll start in about, I think, under 4 hours time, at 9:30 a.m. Singapore time. So I'll be back after breakfast. So do check us out during the breakfast session. And Wayne Chung, PodFest Asia organizer and founder, signing off. Bye-bye.